The scorching summer of 1875 had turned the Colorado frontier into a tinderbox where a single spark could ignite devastating fires across the parched landscape. For Rebecca Collins, a determined widow struggling to maintain her remote trading post at the edge of the territories, survival meant making difficult choices every day. But on that fateful July afternoon, as black smoke billowed across the eastern horizon, she never imagined that racing toward a burning wagon would forever alter her destiny, or that saving two terrified Comanche children from the flames would bring their father, the most feared war chief on the frontier, to her doorstep 3 days later, with 30 warriors at his command. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The merciless sun beat down on Clearwater trading post like a blacksmith's hammer on hot metal. Rebecca Collins wiped sweat from her brow with a handkerchief that had long since soaked through, wondering if the heat would ever break. At 34, she had weathered 4 summers alone at this isolated outpost since influenza had claimed her husband Daniel. But something about this particular season seemed determined to test her resolve beyond all previous limits. Gonna be another scorcher, Miss Rebecca, called Samuel Jackson, the elderly former Buffalo soldier who helped maintain the trading post's small stable. Thermometer's already climbing past 90, and it ain't even midday. Rebecca nodded, shielding her, eyes to check the cloudless sky. The creek's down another 2 inches since yesterday. We'll need to start rationing water for the livestock if this keeps up. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Rebecca instinctively reached for the Winchester rifle that was never far from her grasp these days. The trading post's remote location, 15 miles from the nearest settlement of Copper Springs, made it vulnerable to all manner of frontier dangers. Her tension eased when she recognized Marshall Hayes, a regular customer who ranched 10 miles west. He rode directly to the water trough, allowing his exhausted horse to drink before even acknowledging her presence. When he finally dismounted, his expression was grim beneath his dust-covered hat. "Army's on the move," he announced without preamble. "Lieutenant Warren and 30 men camped at my place last night. Said they're tracking a band of Comanche who hit Stebbins' place 2 days ago. Took horses and supplies." Rebecca frowned. "Any casualties?" "Stebbins took an arrow in the shoulder, but he'll live. His wife and children were unharmed." Hayes accepted the dipper of water she offered. "Warren claims Chief Thunderhorse himself is leading the band." The name sent a chill through Rebecca. Despite the oppressive heat, Thunderhorse had earned a fearsome reputation across the territory, a brilliant tactician who refused to surrender to reservation life and continued to lead raids against encroaching settlers. Army reports claimed he'd studied at a mission school before returning to his people, making him particularly dangerous as he understood both worlds. "Did Warren say which way they were headed?" Rebecca asked, calculating distances in her mind. "North toward the high country." Hayes glanced eastward. "Nowhere near here, if that's what's worrying you." Rebecca nodded, though the information provided little comfort. Comanche raiders could cover vast distances on horseback, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. After Hayes departed with supplies and ammunition, Rebecca resumed her daily inventory of the trading post's goods. The small log structure served as both store and home, with her living quarters partitioned off in the back. The main room offered an eclectic array of necessities for frontier life: tools, fabric, ammunition, preserved foods, medicines, and the simple luxuries that made harsh existence somewhat bearable. Above the rough-hewn counter hung Daniel's prized possession, a hand-drawn map of the territory stretching from the Arkansas River to the north and the New Mexico border to the south. He had meticulously updated it during their years together, marking water sources, settlements, and trails with remarkable accuracy. Rebecca had continued his practice, finding comfort in maintaining this connection to him. Late afternoon brought another visitor, Dr. William Foster from Copper Springs, making his monthly circuit of outlying homesteads. The physician's weathered face broke into a genuine smile at the sight of Rebecca. "Still holding your ground out here in the middle of nowhere, I see," he remarked, setting his medical bag on the counter. "Someone has to provide civilization's necessities to the uncivilized," she replied with a wry smile. Their friendship had developed gradually after Daniel's death. The doctor had stayed with Rebecca for 3 days during that terrible time, fighting desperately to save her husband before finally conceding defeat to the raging fever. He had been the one to suggest she continue running the trading post rather than returning east to her disapproving family. "Heard about the Comanche movements?" he asked, accepting the coffee she offered. "Hayes brought news this morning. Thunderhorse is apparently leading raids again." Foster nodded grimly. "The Indian agent at Fort Carson claims the reservation supplies have been delayed again. 3 months with half rations would drive anyone to desperate measures." Rebecca appreciated Foster's rare willingness to consider native motivations beyond inherent savagery. Daniel had shared similar perspectives, having traded fairly with various tribes before tensions escalated throughout the region. "That doesn't make it any less dangerous for isolated outposts like this one," she observed. "Perhaps you should stay the night before continuing your rounds." The doctor regretfully declined, citing a difficult childbirth expected at the Hansen farm. After examining Rebecca's small stock of medicines and replenishing several items, he departed eastward with a promise to check on her upon his return. As evening approached, Rebecca completed her usual security measures, checking the shutters on all windows, ensuring the bar for the heavy door was within easy reach, and confirming that both her rifle and Daniel's revolver were loaded and accessible. Such precautions had become second nature in her solitary existence. She had just settled with a book of Emerson's essays, a reminder of her former life as a schoolteacher in Pennsylvania, when the smell of smoke reached her. Rising quickly, she moved to the eastern window and saw what appeared to be a distant orange glow beneath a rising column of dark smoke. Fire was every frontier settler's nightmare, especially during droughts like the current one. If it gained momentum, a prairie, fire could race faster than a galloping horse, consuming everything in its path. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before gathering essentials. Whatever was burning lay along the main trail, which meant travelers might be in danger. Daniel would never have ignored such a situation, and neither would she. Saddling her mare quickly, she secured her rifle in its scabbard, filled canteens with precious water, and grabbed blankets that could be used to smother flames. Samuel appeared from his small cabin behind the stable, alarmed by her preparations. "You ain't thinking of riding toward that fire, are you, Miss Rebecca?" "Someone might need help," she replied, mounting with practiced ease. "Keep watch over the post. I'll return as soon as I can." The old soldier shook his head disapprovingly, but knew better than to argue. "At least take this," he said, handing up a heavy canvas tarp. "Soak it with water if you get close to the flames. Might save your lungs from the smoke." Rebecca nodded gratefully and urged her horse eastward, following the main trail toward the ominous glow that had grown considerably brighter in just the short time since she'd first noticed it. As she rode, the smoke thickened, causing her mare to snort nervously. Rebecca pulled her bandana up over her nose and mouth, squinting against the acrid sting. Cresting a low rise, she finally saw the source, a wagon fully engulfed in flames just off the trail, surrounded by burning grass that threatened to spread into a wider conflagration. She approached cautiously, scanning for survivors. The wagon appeared to be a trader's vehicle, smaller than the typical emigrant conveyances that sometimes pass through the territory. No horses were visible, suggesting they had either broken free or been taken. Rebecca was about to retreat. The fire had progressed too far to salvage anything when she heard what sounded like children crying. The sound came not from the wagon itself, but from a shallow ravine about 30 yards beyond it. Dismounting and ground-tying her mare well away from the flames, Rebecca soaked the canvas tarp in water from her canteen and draped it over her shoulders. The crying grew more distinct as she circled the burning wagon, punctuated by coughing that indicated the children were suffering from smoke inhalation. The ravine dropped about 6 feet below the prairie level, providing some shelter from the direct heat, but filling with smoke that poured downward like an invisible flood. Peering over the edge, Rebecca saw 2 small figures huddled against the earth bank. Children no more than 5 or 6 years old, with dark hair and clothing that immediately identified them as native. "I'm here to help," she called, not knowing if they understood English. When they looked up, their terrified expressions revealed they were twins, a boy and girl with tear-streaked faces and soot-blackened cheeks. Without hesitation, Rebecca slid down into the ravine. The children recoiled, pressing themselves against the bank, clearly frightened of this strange white woman. Rebecca removed her bandana, showing her face fully, and held out her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Fire," she said simply, pointing to the burning wagon. "Dangerous. Come with me." The twins exchanged glances, communicating silently as only siblings could. The boy's arm appeared injured, held awkwardly against his chest. The girl, though obviously frightened, showed remarkable composure as she assessed Rebecca with intelligent eyes that seemed too old for her young. "Peace." Recognizing that time was critical as smoke continued to fill the ravine, Rebecca took a calculated risk. She approached slowly, then simply picked up the injured boy, who was too weak to resist. After a moment's hesitation, the girl grasped the edge of Rebecca's skirt, apparently deciding that this stranger represented their best hope of survival. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Climbing out of the ravine while carrying a child proved challenging, but adrenaline provided the necessary strength. Once on level ground, Rebecca hurried the children toward her horse, the girl maintaining her grip on Rebecca's skirt while, coughing violently. The mare danced nervously as they approached, disturbed by the smoke and the smell of fire. Rebecca managed to calm her enough to lift the children up, placing the boy in front and the girl behind him. She mounted behind them both, grateful that her horse was sturdy enough to carry the triple burden. As they rode away from the burning wagon, the girl turned to look back, saying something in Comanche that Rebecca couldn't understand. The boy remained silent, his small body trembling against her. They had traveled perhaps a half-mile when Rebecca heard the distinctive crack of burning wood giving way, followed by a whoosh of flames as the wagon collapsed completely. The fire would burn itself out against the trail's dirt break, unable to jump to the grassland on the other side without stronger winds to carry it. The children needed immediate attention. The boy's breathing had grown labored, and his injured arm required treatment. The girl, though physically stronger, remained rigidly alert, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon as if expecting pursuit or rescue. Rebecca considered her options. Copper Springs would have a proper doctor, but the 15-mile journey might prove too much for the injured boy in his current condition. Her trading post was closer and offered immediate shelter and basic medical supplies. Making her decision, she turned the mare westward toward home. "You're safe now," she told the children, not knowing if they understood her words, but hoping her tone conveyed the reassurance she intended. "I'll take care of you until we find your people." As they rode, Rebecca's mind raced with questions. What were Comanche children doing in a trader's wagon? Had they been captured? Was the fire an accident or deliberately set? And most troubling, if these children belonged to Thunder Horse's band, what would happen when their absence was discovered? Darkness had fallen by the time they reached the trading post. Samuel rushed out at their approach, his concerned expression shifting to shock when he saw the native children. "Sweet Jesus, Miss Rebecca," he breathed. "Tell me you ain't brought Comanche young'uns here." "They were trapped near a burning wagon," she replied, carefully dismounting before lifting the semi-conscious boy down. "What would you have had me do? Leave them to die?" The old soldier shook his head, taking the reins to lead the exhausted mare to the stable. "No, ma'am, that wouldn't be right, but this could bring a world of trouble down on us." Rebecca couldn't disagree with his assessment, but the immediate needs of the children took precedence over potential future complications. She carried the boy into the trading post while the girl followed closely, still maintaining her grip on Rebecca's skirt as if it represented her only security in this strange situation. Inside, Rebecca quickly prepared her own bed for the injured boy. As she gently laid him down, she got her first clear look at his wounded arm. A deep gash ran from elbow to wrist, partially cauterized by the fire, but still needing proper treatment to prevent infection. Working methodically, Rebecca cleaned and bandaged the wound while the girl watched with solemn attention. When she attempted to examine the girl next, however, she encountered fierce resistance. The child backed away, shaking her head vehemently. "Brother first," she said in heavily accented but understandable English, surprising Rebecca. "Help him." Rebecca nodded. "I've treated his arm. He needs to rest now. Will you let me check you for injuries?" The girl hesitated before pointing to Rebecca's water pitcher. "Thirsty? Brother thirsty too." Rebecca brought water for both children, helping the semi-conscious boy take small sips while the girl drank eagerly. As she worked, Rebecca tried to establish basic communication. "My name is Rebecca Collins." She touched her chest, then gestured toward the children with an inquiring expression. The girl studied her for a long moment before responding. "I am a rising star," she said, then pointed to her brother. "He is Swift Arrow. Our father is a great chief." Rebecca's suspicions crystallized into certainty. "Thunder Horse?" she asked quietly. The girl's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with caution. She gave an almost imperceptible nod before asking, "You know our father?" "I know of him," Rebecca answered truthfully. "How did you come to be in that burning wagon?" Rising Star's expression clouded. "Bad men took us when we collected berries. 2 sons in a wagon, locked in a box." She made a gesture indicating restraint. "Today, wagons stopped. Fire started. Men ran away when other men came. Fighting sounds." She pointed to her brother. "Swift Arrow broke the box. We ran to hide. Then you came." The story emerged with remarkable clarity despite the language limitations. The twins had been kidnapped, likely by traders hoping to sell them for ransom or worse. Someone had attacked the traders, possibly Thunder Horse's warriors tracking the kidnappers, or perhaps hostile settlers. During the chaos, fire had broken out, and the captors had fled, abandoning the children still. Locked in the wagon, Rebecca felt a cold knot form in her stomach. If Thunder Horse was indeed hunting for his missing children, the trail would eventually lead here. A Comanche chief would not rest until his children were recovered, especially not a leader with Thunder Horse's reputation. "Your father will he be looking for you?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Rising Star nodded with absolute conviction. "Father will come. Father will find us." Her small chin lifted proudly. "Father always finds." Swift Arrow stirred on the bed, mumbling feverishly in Comanche. His sister moved immediately to his side, speaking softly in their language. The boy calmed at her voice, his breathing evening out as he drifted back to unconsciousness. "He needs medicine," Rebecca said, retrieving her small supply of herbs and tinctures. "This will help fight the fever." She prepared a bitter willow bark tea, adding honey to make it palatable. Rising Star helped lift her brother's head so Rebecca could administer the medicine drop by drop. Throughout the process, Rebecca found herself increasingly impressed by the young girl's composure and maturity. As the night deepened, Rebecca prepared a pallet near the bed where Rising Star could sleep beside her brother. The girl accepted the blankets, but showed no inclination to rest, maintaining her vigilant watch over Swift Arrow. "You should sleep too," Rebecca suggested. "You're safe here." Rising Star regarded her with those unnervingly adult eyes. "Why you? Help us? White women fear Comanche." The question deserved an honest answer. "Because you're children who needed help," Rebecca said simply. "I wouldn't leave any child to die, no matter who their parents might be." This seemed to satisfy the girl, who nodded thoughtfully before asking another unexpected question. "You have children?" Rebecca felt the familiar pang that always accompanied thoughts of what might have been. "No," she answered. "My husband died before we could have children. Where is your family, your people?" "Back east, very far away." Rebecca hadn't spoken to her parents or sisters since they had opposed her marriage to Daniel and his foolish frontier adventures, as they had described his trading ambitions. Rising Star considered this information with a furrowed brow. "Alone is dangerous," she declared with the absolute certainty of youth. "People need people." Despite the gravity of their situation, Rebecca found herself smiling at the child's assessment. "Sometimes we don't get to choose, little one." As midnight approached, Swift Arrow's fever spiked dangerously. Rebecca worked tirelessly to cool his small body with damp cloths, while Rising Star sang softly in Comanche, melodic phrases that sounded like prayers for healing chants. Samuel appeared briefly at the door, connecting to the store portion of the building. "Marshal Hayes just rode in," he reported in a low voice. "Says the army's changed direction, heading this way now. Seems they found the burned wagon and tracks leading westward." Rebecca's heart sank. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated. If Lieutenant Warren arrived and found Comanche children at her trading post, the children of Thunder Horse himself, the potential for disaster multiplied exponentially. "Tell Hayes to ride for Dr. Foster," she decided quickly. "The boy needs more medical attention than I can provide, and Samuel—" She hesitated, weighing her next words carefully. "Don't mention the children to Hayes. Just say I need the doctor urgently." The old soldier nodded, understanding the delicate balance she was attempting to maintain. If the army arrived before Thunder Horse, the children might be taken as hostages for tribal good behavior, a practice Rebecca had heard officers discuss with disturbing casualness. If Thunder Horse arrived first, the consequences could be equally dire for the trading post and everyone in it. As Samuel left to relay her message, Rebecca returned to her nursing duties. Rising Star had finally succumbed to exhaustion, curled protectively around her brother with one small hand resting on his chest, as if to monitor each breath. Looking down at the sleeping twins, Rebecca felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. Whatever complications arose from her decision to rescue these children, she could not, would not, regret it. Their lives were worth any risk she might face as a consequence. Outside, the windless summer night pressed close around the isolated trading post. Somewhere in the darkness, a Comanche chief hunted for his stolen children. Somewhere else, soldiers searched for hostile natives, and in between stood Rebecca Collins, a widow whose simple act of compassion had placed her directly in the crosshairs of forces far beyond her control. She checked Swift Arrow's fever again, finding it slightly reduced. Perhaps the medicine was finally taking effect. Rebecca settled into a chair beside the bed, rifle across her lap, preparing for the long vigil until dawn. "Your father will find you," she whispered to the sleeping children, an acknowledgement, rather than a fear. "And when he does, I pray he understands I meant only to help." Dawn broke with the muted colors of smoke lingering in the air from distant fires. Rebecca had maintained her vigil through the night, dozing intermittently while constantly monitoring Swift Arrow's condition. The boy's fever had finally broken in the pre-dawn hours, his breathing growing steadier as morning approached. Rising Star had awakened at first light, immediately checking her brother before turning her attentive gaze to Rebecca. "He is better," the girl stated with quiet certainty. "Your medicine helped." Rebecca smiled tiredly. "Yes, he's improving, but he'll need several days to regain his strength." She rose stiffly from her chair and moved to the small stove to prepare a simple breakfast. Rising Star followed, watching Rebecca's every movement with intense curiosity. When Rebecca handed her a bowl of cornmeal mush sweetened with molasses, the child accepted it cautiously, sniffing the contents before taking a tentative taste. "Good," she declared after careful consideration, and proceeded to eat with surprising delicacy for one so young. Rebecca was preparing a second bowl for Swift Arrow when Samuel's urgent knock interrupted the quiet morning routine. She opened the door to find the old soldier's face drawn with concern. "Riders coming from the east," he reported in a low voice. "Army patrol by the look of 'em." "Lieutenant Warren?" Rebecca asked, her stomach tightening. Samuel nodded grimly. "Got about 10 men with him. Be here in 15 minutes, I reckon." Rebecca's mind raced. Hayes must have mentioned her urgent request for the doctor despite Samuel's instructions. The Army's appearance now complicated an already precarious situation. "Take Rising Star to the storm cellar," she decided quickly. "Swift Arrow isn't well enough to move. I'll cover for him here." Samuel hesitated. "Miss Rebecca, if they find you hiding Indian children—" "I'm not hiding them," she interrupted. "I'm caring for injured children who needed help. There's a difference." The distinction might seem semantic to others, but it mattered to Rebecca. She had nothing to be ashamed of, though she harbored no illusions about how some officers might view her actions. Rising Star had been listening intently, her dark eyes moving between the adults. "Soldiers coming?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her expression. Rebecca knelt to the child's level. "Yes, they won't harm you, but it's safer if you go with Samuel for now. Your brother will stay with me because he's too sick to move." Rising Star shook her head firmly. "I stay with my brother. The soldiers might take you both if they find you," Rebecca explained gently. "If you hide, I can try to make them leave without searching the post." The girl considered this logic, then nodded reluctantly. "You protect Swift Arrow?" "With my life," Rebecca promised, meaning it more deeply than she had expected. Samuel led Rising Star through the storeroom and out the back door toward the concealed entrance to the storm cellar, built into a small rise behind the trading post. Rebecca hurriedly tidied the living quarters, hiding evidence of her young guests. She covered Swift Arrow with a patchwork quilt, positioning him so his distinctive features were partially obscured. If questioned, she would claim he was the child of travelers who had stopped for assistance, a story close enough to truth to be convincing, particularly if the soldiers didn't look too closely. Rebecca had just completed these preparations when the rhythmic sound of approaching hoofbeats announced the patrol's arrival. She smoothed her skirts, pinned loose strands of hair back into her simple bun, and moved to the trading post's main room to meet her uninvited guests. Lieutenant James Warren dismounted with the confident air of a man accustomed to deference. At 28, he had already developed the hard edges and perpetual squint of career officers assigned to frontier duty. His uniform, despite the dusty conditions, remained meticulously maintained, a man who believed in appearances. "Mrs. Collins," he greeted her with a curt nod, "we're tracking Comanche hostiles believed to be operating in this area." "Lieutenant," Rebecca acknowledged, keeping her tone neutral. "What brings you specifically to my trading post?" "Warrens," Eyes narrowed slightly at her direct question. Marshal Hayes mentioned you sent for a doctor urgently. Given the recent Comanche activities, we thought it prudent to check on your welfare. The explanation seemed reasonable enough, though Rebecca suspected the lieutenant's concern had more to do with gathering intelligence than her personal safety. "I appreciate your consideration," she replied evenly. "But as you can see, I'm managing, and quite well." Warren removed his hat, revealing close-cropped blonde hair. "Mind if my men water their horses? Been a long ride from the Hanson place." "Of course," Rebecca gestured toward the water trough. "Your men are welcome to refresh themselves as well." As the soldiers dismounted and stretched road-weary muscles, Warren seemed in no hurry to depart. He studied the trading post with calculated interest. "Heard you encountered some trouble yesterday," he remarked casually. "Something about a fire to the east?" Rebecca maintained her composure, though inwardly she cursed Hayes's loose tongue. "I noticed smoke and investigated. A wagon had burned. Looked like a trader's vehicle. No survivors that I could find." Warren's attention sharpened. "Interesting. We found the same wagon yesterday evening. Evidence suggests it was transporting special cargo." "What kind of cargo?" Rebecca asked, careful to show only mild curiosity. "Captives," Warren replied bluntly. "2 Comanche children. We believe they belonged to Chief Thunderhorse's band based on items found nearby." He watched her face closely. "Tracks led in this general direction before we lost them on the hard ground near the creek." Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "I returned directly after determining there was nothing I could do about the fire. If there were children there, I certainly didn't see them." The lie tasted bitter, but she reminded herself that these children's safety depended on her convincing performance. Warren seemed about to press further when a muffled cough came from the back room. "Someone ill?" he inquired, glancing toward the closed door. Rebecca had prepared for this question. "Yes, a traveler's son. They stopped yesterday seeking help. For the boy's fever. I sent for Dr. Foster since the child's condition worsened overnight." Warren's expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "The father's not present." "He's tending their horses in the stable," Rebecca improvised. "They hope to continue their journey once the doctor has examined the boy." A soldier approached from outside, interrupting their conversation. "Lieutenant, we found fresh tracks behind the trading post. Small prints, could be children." Rebecca's heart sank. Rising Star must have left tracks when Samuel led her to the storm cellar. Warren's demeanor shifted instantly from polite inquiry to authoritative demand. "Mrs. Collins, I need to inspect your entire property immediately. Lieutenant, I've cooperated fully." "This isn't a request, ma'am." His hand moved to rest meaningfully on his holstered pistol. "If you're harboring enemies of the United States, that constitutes treason." Rebecca felt a surge of indignation. "Children are hardly enemies, Lieutenant, regardless of their parentage." Her words confirmed his suspicions. Warren's eyes hardened as he signaled to his men, "Search the premises. Every room, every outbuilding." 2 soldiers moved immediately toward the back room. Rebecca stepped in their path, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The boy in there is ill with fever. Your intrusion could worsen his condition." "Move aside, Mrs. Collins," Warren ordered coldly. Rebecca stood her ground. "I will not. That child is under my protection." For a tense moment, it seemed Warren might physically remove her from his path. Then a new voice entered the confrontation, deep, authoritative, and unexpectedly cultivated. "Lieutenant Warren, I suggest you reconsider your approach." Dr. William Foster stood in the trading post's doorway, his medical bag in hand and his expression severe. He stepped inside, positioning himself beside Rebecca. "Doctor," Warren acknowledged stiffly, "this doesn't concern you." "When you threaten a woman for providing medical care to a child, it absolutely concerns me," Foster replied evenly. I was summoned here professionally, and I find your behavior obstructing my duties." Warren's jaw tightened. "We have reason to believe Mrs. Collins is harboring Comanche children, specifically the offspring of Thunderhorse, who has been conducting raids throughout the territory." Dr. Foster appeared unimpressed. "And this justifies threatening a respected member of our community? One who has provided essential services to settlers for years?" He shook his head disapprovingly. "Even if such children were here, treating their injuries would be a moral obligation, not a crime." The doctor's presence and unwavering support provided Rebecca with precious moments to gather her thoughts. Warren clearly hadn't expected resistance from a fellow government authority figure. "The army has standing orders regarding hostile tribes," Warren insisted, though with slightly less conviction, "and doctors have standing orders regarding the treatment of the ill and injured," Foster countered. "Now I understand you have a duty to perform, Lieutenant, but so do I. I propose a compromise." Warren raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Allow me to examine my patient first, confirming Mrs. Collins's statement about the child's condition. You and one officer may observe, from a respectful distance to satisfy your concerns. The rest of your men can water their horses and rest while we resolve this matter civilly." The lieutenant considered the proposal, visibly calculating his options. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Sergeant Mills will accompany us. The rest of the search will proceed as ordered." Rebecca exchanged a glance with Dr. Foster, silently communicating her gratitude and concern. Together they led Warren and his sergeant to the back room where Swift Arrow lay sleeping, his small face flushed with lingering fever. The moment Warren saw the child, his expression confirmed he recognized the boy's Comanche heritage. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "Lieutenant," Dr. Foster said sharply, "I will not permit you to threaten a patient under my care." Warren's hand stilled, but his face hardened. "That's Thunderhorse's son. His band killed 3 settlers last month near Fort Carson." "This boy has killed no one," Rebecca stated firmly. "He's a child with a severe injury and fever who would have died in that fire if I hadn't brought him here." Dr. Foster moved efficiently to examine Swift Arrow, his experienced hands gentle as he checked the boy's pulse and temperature. "Infection in the arm wound, though it appears to be responding to treatment. The fever's breaking, but he's severely dehydrated." He looked up at Rebecca. "Your care likely saved his life." "Where's the other one?" Warren demanded abruptly. Tracks showed 2 children. Rebecca maintained her composure. "What other one?" "Thunderhorse's twins are well known," Warren snapped. "The boy never travels without his sister." Before Rebecca could respond, a commotion erupted from the main room of the trading post. Shouts from soldiers were followed by the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. Warren turned immediately, drawing his pistol as he moved toward the disturbance. Rebecca and Dr. Foster followed, the doctor positioning himself protectively. In front of her, in the trading post's main room, they found a standoff developing. Samuel stood near the front door, his ancient Sharps rifle leveled at a young soldier who had his own weapon aimed in return. Between them stood Rising Star, her small figure somehow commanding the room's attention despite the armed men surrounding her. "Found her trying to sneak back in through the stable, Lieutenant," reported a corporal holding the back door. "Old man here pulled a gun when we tried to detain her." Rising Star's eyes found Rebecca immediately. Despite the child's obvious fear, she stood with remarkable dignity, her chin raised in an echo of her father's reported bearing. "Lower your weapon, Mr. Jackson," Warren ordered Samuel. "You're outnumbered and outgunned." Samuel's weathered hands remained steady on his rifle. "Ain't letting you take this child, Lieutenant. Ain't right, and it ain't Christian." The tension in the room crackled like static before a lightning strike. One wrong move from anyone could trigger disaster. Dr. Foster stepped forward deliberately, his voice pitched to Project Calm authority. Everyone lower your weapons. There are children present, for God's sake. His reasonable tone penetrated the charged atmosphere. Slowly, reluctantly, Samuel lowered his rifle. The soldiers maintained their ready stance until Warren signaled them to stand down. Rising Star immediately moved to Rebecca's side, pressing against her skirts in a rare display of childish vulnerability. Warren surveyed the scene with cold calculation. Both of Thunder Horse's children in a white woman's trading post. This is quite the situation you've created, Mrs. Collins. I created nothing, Rebecca replied, placing a protective hand on Rising Star's shoulder. I merely refused to let children burn to death when I could prevent it. Noble sentiment, Warren acknowledged without warmth. Unfortunately, it conflicts with my orders regarding hostile tribes, Dr. Foster interjected. Surely your orders don't extend to imprisoning injured children, Lieutenant. Not imprisoning, Doctor. Securing valuable leverage. Warren's tone suggested he considered this a perfectly reasonable position. These children will be transported to Fort Carson, where they'll be properly cared for while the Army negotiates Thunder Horse's surrender. Rebecca felt Rising Star trembling against her, though the girl remained silent. The casual cruelty of using children as bargaining chips struck her as fundamentally wrong, regardless of military necessity. The boy cannot be moved, Dr. Foster stated categorically. Not for at least 3 days. Attempting to transport him in his condition could kill him. Warren considered this medical assessment with visible frustration. Then we'll establish a guard here until he's fit to travel. Sergeant Mills and Corporal Davis will remain while I lead the rest of the patrol to continue tracking Thunder Horse's band. And if he tracks you instead, Samuel asked bluntly, man finds out you've got his children, he'll come with every warrior he can muster. Warren's expression hardened. We're counting on his attempting rescue, Mr. Jackson. It will save us the trouble of hunting him down piece by piece. The calculated brutality of the strategy, using children as bait for their father, left Rebecca speechless with anger. Dr. Foster, however, maintained his professional demeanor. If you insist on this course, Lieutenant, I must insist on remaining, as well to monitor the boy's condition. He fixed Warren with a steady gaze. Unless you wish to explain to your superiors how a Comanche child died in Army custody due to medical neglect. Warren clearly disliked the doctor's implication, but recognized the political liability. Very well, you may stay until the boy is transportable. He turned to Rebecca. Mrs. Collins, you will continue providing appropriate care under military supervision. Any attempt to interfere with Army personnel will be considered aiding the enemy. With arrangements made for the 2 soldiers to remain at the trading post, Warren prepared to depart with the rest of his patrol. Before mounting, he delivered a final warning. Thunder Horse will come for his children. Make no mistake about that. When he does, my men have orders to protect Army interests by any means necessary. His gaze moved meaningfully to the twins. If you truly care for these children's welfare, pray their father values diplomacy over warfare. After the patrol's departure, an uncomfortable new reality settled over the trading post. Sergeant Mills established himself near the front entrance, rifle close at hand, while Corporal Davis patrolled the perimeter at regular intervals. Their presence transformed Rebecca's home into something resembling a prison, though they maintained minimal interference with her movements inside the building. Dr. Foster worked efficiently to improve Swift Arrow's condition, applying proper medical treatment to the infected wound and preparing additional medicines. The boy had regained consciousness briefly during the examination, his dark eyes reflecting confusion and fear, until Rising Star spoke soothingly to him in Comanche. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Rebecca prepared a simple meal for her. Unexpected household, stew and cornbread shared in strained silence. Rising Star refused to leave her brother's side, maintaining a protective vigil that reminded Rebecca powerfully of a mother wolf guarding an injured cub. "Will their father really come?" Rebecca asked Dr. Foster quietly as they washed dishes together, out of earshot of the soldiers. The doctor nodded grimly. "Thunderhorse is known for many things, but abandoning his children isn't among them. By all accounts, he's been inconsolable since their disappearance 3 days ago." "What kind of man is he, really?" Rebecca had heard the rumors and army reports, but trusted Foster's more measured assessment. Foster considered carefully before answering. "Complex, educated at a mission school, but deeply committed to traditional Comanche ways. Ruthless when provoked, but known to honor agreements when others deal fairly." He glanced toward the back room where the twins rested. "Those children are his world, since his wife died 2 years ago." This glimpse of Thunderhorse as a grieving widower, rather than simply a hostile chieftain, resonated with Rebecca's own experience of loss. She found herself wondering what choices she might make if forced to protect loved ones in an increasingly hostile world. "Warren intends to use them as hostages," she observed, keeping her voice low. "What happens when Thunderhorse discovers this trap?" Foster's expression grew troubled. Nothing good for anyone involved. He dried his hands on a kitchen towel. "Though I suspect the lieutenant underestimates the chief's intelligence. Thunderhorse didn't survive this long by walking blindly into army ambushes." As darkness fell, Rebecca settled Rising Star on a pallet beside her brother's bed, after finally convincing the exhausted child to rest. The girl had maintained remarkable composure throughout the day's events, but Rebecca didn't miss how her small hands occasionally trembled, or how she startled at sudden noises. "Your father will find you," Rebecca whispered, echoing her words from the previous night, but with a new understanding of their implications. "And when he does, I'll do everything I can to prevent bloodshed." Rising Star's solemn eyes studied Rebecca's face. "Why are you help us? Soldiers, your people." The question cut to the heart of Rebecca's increasingly complicated position. "They're not my people when they use children as pawns in war," she answered honestly. "What's right doesn't change based on who's involved." The girl seemed to accept this answer, her eyelids finally growing heavy with exhaustion. "Father says the same thing. Right is right. Wrong is wrong. Simple." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Rebecca observed. Rising Star nodded sleepily. "Wisest, strongest, most dangerous when angry." Her eyes closed as she added with perfect childish confidence, "He will come soon." Rebecca gently tucked the blanket around the sleeping girl, troubled by the child's final assessment. Thunderhorse would indeed come. A father searching for his children, a chief defending his bloodline, a leader with a fearsome reputation for tactical brilliance and uncompromising retribution against those who threatened his people. Outside, the summer night hummed with cricket song and distant coyote calls. Somewhere in that darkness, a Comanche war chief moved like a shadow across the land, drawing ever closer to the trading post where his children lay under armed guard. And Rebecca Collins found herself in the impossible position of hoping for his swift arrival, while dreading the potential consequences when it came. Rising Star's breathing deepened into the even rhythm of childhood sleep. Swift Arrow stirred, briefly, mumbling something in Comanche before settling again. Rebecca extinguished the lamp and moved to the window, gazing out at the star-scattered sky. 3 riders appeared silently at the edge of the trading post's clearing, their silhouettes barely visible against the night sky, before they melted back into the darkness like apparitions. Rebecca blinked, wondering if exhaustion had caused her to imagine them, but a prickle along her spine told her otherwise. The scouting party had arrived. The chief would not be far behind. Rebecca didn't mention the shadowy riders she'd glimpsed, to anyone. Sleep came in restless fragments that night, her senses heightened to every sound outside the trading post. Sergeant Mills maintained his vigilant position near the front door, occasionally making rounds to check windows and the rear entrance. Corporal Davis had established himself on the porch after completing his patrol of the perimeter, his rifle across his knees as he stared into the darkness. Dr. Foster had fallen asleep in a chair near Swift Arrow's bed, his medical bag open on the floor beside him. The boy's condition had improved steadily under proper treatment, though he remained weak and feverish. Rising Star slept curled protectively beside her brother, one small hand resting on his chest as if to reassure herself of each heartbeat. In the deepest part of night, Rebecca was startled, fully awake by Swift Arrow's sudden movement. The boy sat upright, his eyes wide and alert despite his illness. He spoke rapidly in Comanche, his voice vibrating with an intensity that belied his weakened state. Rising Star awakened instantly, placing her hand over her brother's mouth and whispering urgently to him. They exchanged a flurry of words in their native tongue, both children now fully alert and oriented toward the window where Rebecca had seen the riders. Dr. Foster stirred, blinking confusion away as he registered the twins' behavior. "What's happening?" he asked softly. Rebecca moved to the window, careful to stay hidden from outside view. "I think their father is near." As if confirming her suspicion, a nightbird's call sounded from the darkness, 3 notes followed by 2 shorter ones. The perfect mimicry would have fooled most frontier dwellers, but the twins' reaction revealed its true nature. Rising Star slipped from the bed and padded silently to the window, returning the call with an identical pattern. "That's a signal," Rebecca whispered. "He's communicating with them." Dr. Foster's expression reflected concern rather than alarm. "The lieutenant's strategy is working, then. Thunderhorse is approaching the trap." "We can't let that happen," Rebecca decided, the words crystallizing her scattered thoughts into sudden clarity. "Those children don't deserve to watch their father captured or killed, and he doesn't deserve such a fate for trying to rescue them." Foster studied her face in the dim light. "What are you suggesting, Rebecca?" Before she could answer, Sergeant Mills appeared in the doorway, his rifle ready. "What's all the whispering about?" he demanded, glancing suspiciously at the fully awake twins. "The boy's fever broke," Dr. Foster replied smoothly, moving to check Swift Arrow's forehead. "We were discussing his improved condition." Mills didn't appear entirely convinced. "Keep it down." Davis thought he heard something outside. After the sergeant returned to his post, Rebecca leaned close to Foster. "We need to get the children back to their father without bloodshed." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "That's dangerously close to treason, according to the lieutenant's definition." "I never swore allegiance to cruelty," Rebecca countered quietly. "Helping these children was the right thing yesterday. It remains the right thing today." Foster sighed, conflict evident in his expression. As a physician, his first loyalty was to his patients, but as a citizen of the territory, he had obligations to civil authority as well. "What would you have me do?" he finally asked. Rebecca outlined her thinking in rapid whispers. "The children need to signal their exact location to their father. Then we need to create a diversion that allows them to leave without the soldiers pursuing them immediately." Rising Star had been listening intently, her understanding of English clearly stronger than Rebecca had initially assessed. "Father waiting," she confirmed softly. "Many warriors, no fight if children are safe." Rebecca knelt before the girl. "Can you tell your father that we want to help you return to him without anyone getting hurt?" Rising Star nodded confidently, returning to the window to emit another bird call, subtly different from the previous one. A response came almost immediately, followed by silence. "He understands," the girl reported. "Asks how." Dr. Foster checked his pocket watch in the dim light. It's nearly 4. Dawn comes early this time of year. The approaching daylight added urgency to their planning. Once a full morning arrived, any rescue or escape would become dramatically more difficult. "Swift Arrow can't walk," Rebecca noted, studying the injured boy. "He'll need to be carried." "I can create a medical emergency," Foster suggested. "Something requiring Mills and Davis to assist me, creating a brief window of opportunity." Rebecca considered this option, but Rising Star shook her head firmly. "Soldiers do not help. Soldiers shoot." Her assessment of military priorities was depressingly accurate. A sudden inspiration struck Rebecca. "Samuel's hunting dogs," she whispered. "They're trained to chase on command. The old soldier kept 3 hounds for hunting and security, large vocal animals housed in a pen behind the stable. If released with the right encouragement, they would create a substantial distraction." Swift Arrow spoke for the first time, his voice weak but determined. "I walk," he insisted in halting English, "for father, for people." Rising Star translated his longer statement. "Brother says he is the son of the chief, must be strong even when legs are weak." Rebecca exchanged glances with Dr. Foster, who shook his head slightly. "Medically inadvisable, but spiritually necessary, perhaps," he observed quietly. Their whispered conference was interrupted by Corporal Davis entering the room. Unlike Sergeant Mills, the younger soldier appeared genuinely uncomfortable with their assignment. He glanced at the twins with an expression closer to embarrassment than suspicion. "Ma'am, the sergeant requests coffee if you're brewing any," he said to Rebecca. "We'll be changing shifts soon." Rebecca seized the opportunity. "Of course, Corporal. I'll prepare some right away." As she moved toward the kitchen area, Rebecca's mind raced with possibilities. The coffee presented a potential vehicle for sedation. She had laudanum in her medical supplies that could render the soldiers unconscious without permanent harm. The ethical implications troubled her, but weighed against the potential bloodshed of a Comanche attack, it seemed the lesser evil. Dr. Foster appeared to follow her thinking. He discreetly removed a small brown bottle from his medical bag and slipped it to her behind the kitchen workbench. Their silent communication spoke volumes about their shared priority, saving lives on all sides of this conflict. While Rebecca prepared coffee, Rising Star continued the subtle bird call communication with her father's forces outside. Swift Arrow had risen shakily to his feet, testing his strength with his sister's support. The boy's determination was evident in his rigid posture and clenched jaw, though perspiration beaded his forehead from even this small exertion. Rebecca added a carefully measured dose of laudanum to the pot of coffee, ensuring it would be strong, enough to work quickly, but not dangerously potent. She poured 3 cups, 1 each for the soldiers and 1 for Dr. Foster to maintain appearances. As she carried the tray into the main room, she found Sergeant Mills peering out the front window, his posture tense. "Something's not right," he muttered, accepting the coffee without looking at it. "Too quiet out there." Rebecca's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "It's always quiet before dawn. Even the crickets rest." Mills took a deep swallow of the doctored coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. "Strong brew. Frontier coffee," Rebecca replied with a forced smile. "Keeps a person alert." Corporal Davis drank his portion more slowly, glancing occasionally toward the back room where the twins remained with Dr. Foster. "Seems wrong somehow," he said quietly. "Using children this way." Mills shot him a warning look. "Orders are orders, Davis. Not our place to question." Rebecca observed the young corporal's discomfort with interest. Perhaps he might prove an unexpected ally if matters deteriorated. Within minutes, the laudanum began to take effect. Mills fought it longest, his military discipline battling the drug's influence. He rose unsteadily, reaching for his rifle as his suspicions belatedly surfaced. "You've done something," he slurred, attempting to aim the weapon at Rebecca but finding his coordination failing. Drugged the coffee. "For your own safety, Sergeant," Rebecca confirmed as he slumped back into his chair. "And everyone else's." Davis had already succumbed, his younger constitution paradoxically more vulnerable to the sedative. He lay slumped across the counter, breathing deeply in artificial slumber. Rebecca moved quickly to the back room. "They're unconscious. It won't last long, perhaps an hour at most." Foster nodded grimly. "Then we'd best move quickly." Rebecca gathered essential supplies, water, bandages and jerky for the children's journey. Swift Arrow insisted on standing, independently, though his sister remained close to support him if needed. His resemblance to descriptions of his father became more apparent as he straightened himself with dignity, despite his obvious pain. "We go now," Rising Star stated decisively, "Father waiting." Rebecca led them through the storeroom toward the back door, pausing to listen for any sounds of movement outside. The pre-dawn stillness remained unbroken, except for the distant howling of coyotes, or perhaps warriors mimicking coyotes. As Foster eased the door open, Rebecca realized they had a crucial decision to make. "I should be the one to take them," she whispered. "You had no part in drugging the soldiers." The doctor shook his head. "My culpability is already established by providing the laudanum. Besides, Thunderhorse doesn't know you. He might perceive your approach as a threat." "He won't harm her," Rising Star interjected with absolute certainty. "Father knows she saved us, knows she fights soldiers for us." This childish faith was touching but perhaps optimistic. Rebecca had heard too many stories of Comanche raids to approach a war chief without trepidation, regardless of the circumstances. "I'll go first," she decided. "The children will follow you behind them, Doctor. We'll approach slowly with empty hands clearly visible before they could implement." This plan, a new complication arose. Samuel appeared suddenly around the corner of the building, his weathered face reflecting alarm. "Miss Rebecca," he hissed urgently. "Army patrol returning from the east. Looks like Lieutenant Warren himself, about 2 miles out but riding fast." The news changed everything. They no longer had the luxury of a careful approach to Thunderhorse's position. Warren's return likely meant he had discovered the Comanche presence and was rushing back to secure his leverage. "How far is the tree?" "Line?" Rebecca asked, calculating distances. 100 yards of open ground," Samuel replied. "Too exposed for daylight, but might make it before dawn breaks fully." Rising Star had already begun signaling to her father's forces, urgent bird calls that required no translation. The response came immediately, multiple calls from different positions around the trading post. "Father says run to the lightning tree," the girl translated. "Warriors cover us." Rebecca knew the landmark, an ancient cottonwood split by lightning that stood at the edge of the forest beyond her property. The massive tree was visible even in the dim pre-dawn light, its skeletal upper branches reaching skyward like supplicating arms. "We need to release the dogs first," Rebecca decided. "They'll create confusion and disguise your tracks." Samuel nodded, moving immediately toward the kennel behind the stable. Within moments, the baying of excited hounds filled the air as they were freed to chase an imaginary quarry across the property. The diversion created their opportunity. Rebecca led the children and Dr. Foster through the garden behind the trading post and into the tall grass beyond. Swift Arrow moved with remarkable determination despite his weakness, refusing assistance except from his sister. They had covered perhaps 30 yards when a shout came from the trading post. One of the soldiers had awakened earlier than expected and raised the alarm. A rifle shot cracked through the dawn air, though whether as a warning or attack was impossible to determine. "Run!" Rebecca urged the children. "Don't stop until you reach your father." Rising Star pulled her brother forward with desperate strength, the twins moving with surprising speed despite Swift Arrow's condition. Dr. Foster stayed close behind. them ready to support the boy if his strength failed. Rebecca had started to follow when another shout stopped her. Corporal Davis stood at the edge of the garden, swaying slightly from the lingering effects of the laudanum, but with his rifle pointed in her direction. "Mrs. Collins, stop right there," he ordered, though his voice lacked conviction. Rebecca turned to face him, deliberately placing herself between his weapon and the fleeing children. "They deserve to be with their father, Corporal. You know that's right." Davis's young face reflected his inner conflict. "Lieutenant Warren will be here any minute. He'll consider this treason. Then he can charge me with compassion," Rebecca replied steadily. "I'll not apologize for it." Their standoff was interrupted by a new development. From the tree line emerged a single mounted figure, a warrior on a magnificent paint stallion. He wore no war paint, but the eagle feathers in his hair and his commanding presence left no doubt about his identity. Thunder Horse had emerged to cover his children's escape personally. The chief rode directly toward his children, who had nearly reached the midpoint between the trading post and the tree line. Rising Star called out to him in Comanche, her voice carrying clearly across the open ground. Corporal Davis shifted his aim toward the approaching chief, his military training temporarily overriding his moral uncertainty. Rebecca reacted instinctively, grabbing the barrel of his rifle and forcing it upward. "Don't," she pleaded. "He's only retrieving his children." Their brief struggle ended when Samuel appeared with his Sharps rifle. "Lower your weapon, son," the old soldier advised Davis quietly. "Too many Comanche in those trees for you to survive shooting at their chief." The corporal hesitated, then slowly lowered his rifle. "Lieutenant Warren will have us all court-martialed," he murmured, though he sounded almost relieved to have the decision taken from him. Rebecca turned to watch as Thunder Horse reached his children. The chief dismounted in one fluid motion, dropping to one knee to embrace them both. Even at a distance, the power of that reunion was palpable. A father's desperate worry transformed into overwhelming relief. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching riders from the east. Lieutenant Warren's patrol had arrived, and the officer's furious shout carried clearly across the open ground. "Take aim! Fire on the hostiles!" Rebecca's heart froze. The children were still exposed in the open field, their father now equally vulnerable as he prepared to lift them onto his horse. If Warren's men opened fire, all three would be cut down before reaching safety. Without conscious thought, Rebecca found herself running toward the Comanche family, placing herself between them and the approaching soldiers. She heard Samuel shouting her name, heard Dr. Foster's desperate call to stop, but her focus remained singular, reaching Thunder Horse and his children before the army's bullets did. Warren's voice rose again. "Hold fire! What in God's name?" Rebecca covered the remaining distance just as Thunder Horse mounted his horse with Swift Arrow secured before him and Rising Star clinging to his back. The chief's dark eyes locked with hers, his expression unreadable as she positioned herself as a human shield between his family and the soldiers. "Go," she urged breathlessly. "I'll delay them." For a moment that seemed suspended in time. Thunder Horse studied her face. Then he spoke, his English educated and precise despite the urgency of their situation. "You have the heart of a Comanche mother," he said. "My children live because of your courage." With that, he wheeled his horse and galloped toward the tree line, where his warriors waited. Rebecca remained standing in the open field, watching as they vanished into the forest's shadowy embrace, just as Lieutenant Warren and his men surrounded her. The lieutenant's face contorted with rage as he dismounted. "Mrs. Collins, you have interfered with a military operation and aided enemies of the United States government." Rebecca met his furious gaze calmly. "I have prevented the massacre of innocent children and their father, Lieutenant. Nothing more." "Where are my men?" Warren demanded, gesturing toward the trading post where no guards were visible. "Sleeping," Rebecca replied honestly. They'll recover shortly. Warren's hand moved to his pistol. You are under arrest for treason, Mrs. Collins, the penalty for which is death. Dr. Foster had approached during this confrontation and now interjected firmly. The penalty is determined after a proper trial, Lieutenant, unless you intend to add summary execution to your report. The reminder of proper procedure and implied documentation gave Warren pause. Military justice required paperwork and witnesses, elements that might expose the questionable ethics of using children as bait. Samuel joined them, his ancient rifle still in hand, though pointed at the ground. Might want to consider the full story before filing charges, Lieutenant, the old soldier suggested mildly. Army reputation suffers when folks learn about officers threatening women who rescue children. Warren's jaw tightened at the implicit threat of public exposure. He signaled to his men, "Secure the trading post, post guards at all approaches." To Rebecca, he added coldly, "Consider yourself under house arrest pending formal charges." As the soldiers dispersed to follow orders, Warren leaned closer to Rebecca. "Thunderhorse will interpret your assistance as weakness on the Army's part. He'll be emboldened to attack more settlements, and those deaths will be on your conscience." Rebecca refused to be intimidated. "Or perhaps he'll remember that not all white people are enemies, Lieutenant. Compassion creates fewer ghosts than cruelty." Warren had no response to this philosophy. He turned sharply and strode toward the trading post, calling for Sergeant Mills and Corporal Davis. Left momentarily unguarded, Rebecca stood with Dr. Foster and Samuel at the edge of the field where her life had irrevocably changed. The rising sun now illuminated the landscape fully, revealing the trading post surrounded by soldiers, while the forest beyond remained still and secretive. "You realize what you've done?" Foster asked quietly. "Warren won't forget or forgive this. Defiance." "I know," Rebecca acknowledged, watching as soldiers secured her home and business. "But I couldn't have lived with myself if those children had been used as pawns in this endless cycle of vengeance." Samuel nodded approvingly. Daniel would have done the same. The mention of her late husband brought unexpected comfort. Daniel, Collins had built the trading post as a place of fair exchange between cultures, a bridge rather than a barrier. Her actions, however reckless they might appear to others, honored that vision. "What happens now?" she wondered aloud. "Warren will file charges," Foster predicted grimly. "You'll likely be transported to Denver for trial once he secures enough men to escort you." The prospect of leaving her home, possibly forever, struck Rebecca with sudden force. Everything she had built over the past years stood at risk because of a single act of conscience. Yet watching the tree line where Thunderhorse and his children had disappeared, she found herself without regret. Their faces in that moment of reunion had confirmed the rightness of her choice, regardless of the consequences she now faced. "Look there," Samuel said suddenly, pointing toward the forest edge. Lone figure on horseback had emerged briefly from the trees, Thunderhorse himself, silhouetted against the morning sky. He raised his hand in what appeared to be a gesture of acknowledgement directly toward Rebecca before vanishing once more into the shadows. "Well now," Samuel remarked, "that's something you don't see every day. A Comanche chief offering respect to a white woman." Dr. Foster's expression reflected cautious optimism. "Perhaps it's also something Lieutenant Warren should consider before pursuing charges too vigorously." Rebecca hardly heard them. That brief gesture from the forest's edge had conveyed something more meaningful than military considerations or legal consequences. It represented recognition across the chasm of cultural conflict, one parent acknowledging another's sacrifice for the welfare of children. Whatever trials awaited her, Rebecca Collins had earned something few frontier settlers could claim: the respect of a Comanche war chief. In the complex moral landscape of the territories, where right and wrong often blurred along cultural boundaries, she had followed her conscience and discovered an unexpected alliance in the process. As Lieutenant Warren shouted orders from the trading post porch, organizing her confinement and his continued pursuit of hostile elements, Rebecca found herself strangely at peace. The consequences of her actions would unfold as they must, but the essential rightness of saving those children remained undiminished. "Time to face the music," she murmured, straightening her shoulders as she turned toward her besieged home. Whatever justice awaited, she would meet it with the same courage that had driven her toward that burning wagon just 2 days earlier, a lifetime ago. 3 weeks of house arrest had transformed Rebecca's trading post from a haven of independence into a stifling prison. Lieutenant Warren had departed after 5 days, taking most of his men, but leaving behind Corporal Davis and 3 soldiers to ensure she remained confined until formal proceedings could be arranged. Her business operations continued under strict supervision, with Samuel handling most customer interactions, while soldiers monitored every transaction. Dr. Foster visited regularly, ostensibly to check on her health, but primarily to provide moral support and news from beyond her restricted world. On this particular afternoon, he arrived with his medical bag and a folded newspaper from Denver. "You look well, considering the circumstances," he observed, as the guard admitted him to what had once been her private living quarters. Rebecca offered a wry smile. "Confinement agrees with me, apparently." In truth, the strain of uncertainty had taken its toll, evident in the shadows beneath her eyes and the tension that never fully left her shoulders. Once they were relatively private, though with a soldier positioned just outside the open door, Foster lowered his voice. "The territorial governor is reconsidering the charges," he reported. Warren's report raised questions about military protocols regarding native children. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. "Questions from whom?" "Various quarters," Foster replied meaningfully. "The Missionary Society has expressed concerns about the Army's treatment of Comanche children. Several newspapers have picked up the story." He unfolded the newspaper to reveal a headline: "Frontier Widow Faces Treason Charges for Saving Indian Children." Rebecca skimmed the article with growing astonishment. It presented a surprisingly sympathetic account of her actions, questioning whether compassion toward children could reasonably be classified as treason. More significantly, it referenced similar incidents where settlers had assisted native children without facing such severe repercussions. "How did they get this information?" she asked, knowing she had spoken to no reporters. Foster's expression turned enigmatic. "Let's just say Lieutenant Warren isn't universally admired among his peers. Some officers believe his methods risk escalating conflicts unnecessarily." This political dimension added unexpected complexity to her situation. What had seemed a straightforward moral choice had apparently become entangled in broader debates about frontier policy and military conduct. "There's more," Foster continued, glancing toward the door to ensure their conversation remained private. "Thunder Horse's band has been unusually quiet since the incident. No raids, no confrontations, despite increased military patrols." "Perhaps he's moved his people to safer territory," Rebecca suggested, though she suspected the chief's restraint might have deeper significance. Foster nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he's demonstrating something to those willing to pay attention." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the main room of the trading post. Raised voices, including Samuel's distinctive gravelly tones, suggested an unusual development. Rebecca moved toward the door, only to find her path blocked by the guard. "Stay where you are, ma'am," he ordered, though without particular hostility. "Sergeant's orders." Dr. Foster intervened smoothly. "I need to examine my patient in the proper light, soldier. The window would be best." This medical pretext allowed them to position themselves where they could observe the trading post's main room through the partially open door. 3 Comanche men stood just inside the entrance, their presence creating visible tension among the soldiers. Though dressed for peace rather than war, their proud bearing and watchful eyes marked them as warriors. Sergeant Adams, who had replaced Mills as commander of Rebecca's guards, maintained a hand near his holstered pistol as he addressed the unexpected visitors. "State your business and then move along. This trading post is under military jurisdiction." The central figure, a man of perhaps 40 years with a single eagle feather in his hair, responded in fluent English. "We bring a message and payment of debt for Medicine Woman." He used the Comanche term that Rebecca recognized from Rising Star's occasional references to her. "What Medicine Woman?" Adams demanded skeptically. Samuel interjected, "He means Mrs. Collins, Sergeant." "That's what the Comanche call her now." The sergeant frowned. "Mrs. Collins is confined pending trial. She can't receive visitors, especially not—" He hesitated diplomatically. "Non-citizens." The Comanche spokesman remained impassive. "We leave these." He gestured to several bundles his companions had placed on the counter. "Payment for life of Chief's children. Medicine Woman accepts. Balance restored." Before Adams could object further, Dr. Foster stepped into the main room, providing Rebecca a clearer view of the proceedings. "As Mrs. Collins's physician, I can accept items on her behalf," he offered diplomatically. The sergeant appeared relieved by this solution, clearly uncomfortable with the visitors but unwilling to provoke unnecessary conflict. "Very well. They can leave their gifts. Then they need to depart immediately." The spokesman nodded once, then spoke directly to Foster while pointing to each bundle in turn. "Buffalo robes from the chief's own lodge, medicine herbs from Sacred Canyon, hunting knife made by the chief's hand." He paused at the final item, a small deerskin pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. "This chief says, give to Medicine Woman's hands only. Contains an eagle's blessing." Foster accepted the first items with appropriate gravity. "I will ensure Mrs. Collins receives everything, including the special gift." The spokesman studied the doctor's face intently before apparently finding him trustworthy. With a slight nod to his companions, he prepared to depart, but paused to deliver a final message. "Chief Thunderhorse says this: the woman who stands between children and bullets has protection of Comanche people. Any who harm her answer to him." His gaze swept meaningfully over the soldiers before he turned and led his companions from the trading post. After they departed, Sergeant Adams exhaled slowly. "Well, that was interesting." He gestured to the guard outside Rebecca's door. "Johnson, help me examine these items before the doctor takes anything to the prisoner." Rebecca withdrew from the door, processing what she had witnessed. The Comanche delegation's appearance represented far more than simple gratitude. It established a formal relationship that would be recognized and respected by the tribe. Thunderhorse had publicly acknowledged a debt and publicly repaid it, elevating her status from random settler to someone under his personal protection. When Dr. Foster finally entered her quarters, he carried the buffalo robes, herbs, and the small beaded pouch. The knife had been confiscated by Sergeant Adams as a potential weapon, though Foster reported that the sergeant promised to store it safely until Rebecca's legal situation was resolved. "Quite an endorsement," Foster remarked, quietly as he displayed the gifts. Buffalo robes from a chief's lodge are typically reserved for honored tribal members. Rebecca ran her fingers over the soft, meticulously prepared hides. "They're beautiful." "The herbs are equally significant," Foster continued, examining the carefully bundled plants. "Some of these are used in Comanche healing ceremonies. By sharing them, Thunderhorse acknowledges you as a fellow healer." Rebecca's attention shifted to the small pouch. "And this?" The special gift? Foster handed it to her with evident curiosity. That appears to be for your eyes only. The pouch was exquisitely crafted, its surface adorned with tiny beads arranged in patterns that suggested protective symbols. Rebecca carefully loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into her palm. A small, carved eagle fell into her hand, fashioned from what appeared to be antler or bone. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, each feather detailed with microscopic precision, the bird's expression fierce yet noble. More surprising was the item accompanying it, a small piece of paper folded into a tight square. Rebecca unfolded it carefully, revealing a message written in educated, flowing script. The debt for my children's lives cannot be fully repaid, but know that you have the gratitude and protection of my people. The eagle watches over those with courage. When the moon is dark, look to the lightning tree. Th. The implications struck Rebecca immediately. Thunder Horse was literate, confirming rumors of his mission school education, and he was offering something beyond symbolic protection. The reference to the lightning tree and dark moon suggested a planned meeting, though whether for further communication or some other purpose remained unclear. Foster had been examining the carved eagle. Remarkable workmanship, he observed, likely carved by Thunder Horse himself, if accounts of his artistic skills are accurate. Rebecca tucked the note into her sleeve before the doctor could read it. Some messages were not meant for sharing, even with allies. It seems I've made quite an impression, she said lightly. More than you know, Foster replied, his expression turning serious. That delegation's appearance will be reported to territorial authorities. It may significantly impact your case, though whether positively or negatively depends on who receives the information. Rebecca understood his concern. To some officials, Comanche endorsement might further suggest treason, while to others it represented a rare opportunity for improved relations with a typically hostile tribe. What happens next? She asked, returning the eagle to its pouch and securing it in her pocket. I've petitioned for your release into my custody on medical grounds, Foster informed her. Continued confinement is affecting your health, at least according to my professional assessment. His slight smile acknowledged the convenient diagnosis. And if that petition is denied, then we explore other options. Foster's expression suggested those options might extend beyond legal channels, though he offered no specifics. After the doctor's departure, Rebecca contemplated Thunder Horse's message while watching the sky drift toward evening. The next new moon would arrive in 3 days, presumably the dark moon referenced in his note. The lightning tree stood at the edge of the forest beyond her property, where she had last seen the chief acknowledge her from horseback. Was he proposing some form of escape? The possibility simultaneously tempted and troubled her. Fleeing would confirm the treason charges and make her a fugitive. Yet remaining meant trusting a legal system that often treated frontier justice as an afterthought. To military expedience, her contemplation was interrupted by Samuel bringing her evening meal, a simple stew with fresh bread that represented one of the few pleasures remaining in her constrained existence. Had some interesting customers today, the old soldier remarked casually, though his eyes conveyed deeper meaning. So I observed, Rebecca replied, keeping her voice neutral for the benefit of the guard positioned outside. Samuel arranged her meal with deliberate care. Reminds me of trading days before all this trouble. Different folks coming together, exchanging what each values. He met her gaze meaningfully. Sometimes understanding grows when people see beyond their differences. Rebecca recognized he was offering more than philosophical observations. Perhaps someday the trading post will serve that purpose again, she said carefully. Samuel nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing to casual observation. Perhaps sooner than expected. He tapped the table twice before departing, a signal they had developed over years of working together, indicating he had more to communicate when privacy allowed. That opportunity came later that night, when most of the soldiers had retired, except for a single guard on the porch. Samuel appeared at her window, having circled the building through shadows with the stealth of his long-ago scouting days. "News from town," he whispered through the partially open window. "Marshal Jenkins is riding out tomorrow with papers from the governor. Word is you're to be transported to Denver for a formal hearing." Rebecca processed this development. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends," Samuel replied grimly. "Denver means proper legal proceedings rather than military justice, but it also means leaving the trading post indefinitely. Some folks never return from such hearings, guilty or innocent." The prospect of being taken from her home, perhaps permanently, crystallized Rebecca's uncertain future into stark reality. "When will they come?" "Midday tomorrow, according to Davis. The corporal's been talking pretty freely since that business with the twins." Samuel studied her face in the dim light. "You should know something else. Marshall's bringing 15 men, armed for trouble." "They expect resistance?" Rebecca asked, surprised that her transfer would warrant such force. Samuel's expression darkened. "Not from you. Word is they intercepted a message suggesting Comanche warriors might attempt to prevent your removal from the territory." The revelation stunned Rebecca. Had Thunderhorse somehow learned of her impending transfer? Was he planning some form of intervention on her behalf? "That would be disastrous," she breathed. "Any armed confrontation would only escalate tensions throughout the region." Samuel nodded gravely. "Precisely why I thought you should know." The implications weighed heavily on Rebecca. Thunderhorse's protection, while honorable in Comanche terms, might actually accelerate the very conflict she had sought to prevent by returning his children. If his warriors attacked a lawful prisoner transport, the army would respond with overwhelming force, targeting his band specifically. "Samuel," she said urgently, "if there's any way to get a message to Thunderhorse, he needs to know that interference would only make matters worse." The old soldier shook his head regretfully. "No way to reach him before tomorrow unless—" He hesitated, studying her face. "Unless you're thinking about that note in the pouch." Rebecca shouldn't have been surprised. That Samuel knew about the message. Little escaped his notice, especially concerning her safety. "The lightning tree," she acknowledged. 3 days from now, when the moon is dark. "Too late to prevent tomorrow's trouble," Samuel observed. Rebecca's mind raced through potential solutions. The most obvious, escaping herself before the marshal arrived, would prevent immediate conflict, but create longer-term complications for everyone associated with her, including Samuel and Dr. Foster. "What about Corporal Davis?" she suddenly suggested. "You said he's been sympathetic since the incident with the twins." Samuel considered this possibility. Might be willing to look the other way for certain things. Probably not a jailbreak. And though not a jailbreak, Rebecca clarified, just a message delivery. A plan was forming in her mind, risky, but with potential to prevent bloodshed on all sides. If I could write something for Davis to discover during his patrol of the perimeter, Samuel grasped her thinking immediately. Something that might find its way to Comanche scouts without directly involving any soldiers. He nodded slowly. Might work. Boy's got a conscience, and he certainly doesn't want a firefight on his record. With Samuel's help, Rebecca composed a careful message on a scrap of paper torn from her journal, using simple language that would be understood regardless of the recipient's English proficiency. She explained the situation and explicitly requested no interference with tomorrow's transport. She signed it with her Comanche designation, medicine woman, and included a small drawing of an eagle to authenticate the message. Samuel departed with the note concealed in his sleeve, promising to approach Davis discreetly during the corporal's midnight patrol. Whether the young soldier would cooperate remained uncertain, but it represented their best hope for preventing a disastrous confrontation. Rebecca slept little that night, her mind cycling through scenarios both hopeful and catastrophic. By dawn, she had resolved to cooperate fully with her transport regardless of circumstances. If Thunder Horse's warriors appeared despite her warning, she would use every means at her disposal to prevent violence, including surrendering herself. Immediately to the marshal's custody, the morning passed with agonizing slowness. Rebecca packed her few personal possessions, photographs of Daniel, her mother's Bible, and essential clothing. The carved eagle remained secured in its pouch, hidden within her skirts where searchers were unlikely to discover it. At mid-morning, Sergeant Adams informed her officially of the impending transfer. "Marshal Jenkins will arrive approximately noon, Mrs. Collins. You'll be transported to Denver for formal hearing on charges of interfering with military operations and providing aid to hostile forces." Rebecca accepted this information calmly. "I understand, Sergeant. I'll be ready." Adams hesitated, then added unexpectedly, "For what it's worth, ma'am, not everyone agrees with how this situation has been handled. Those children—" He trailed off, apparently reconsidering the wisdom of expressing personal opinions. "Thank you, Sergeant," Rebecca replied, genuinely appreciative of even this small acknowledgement. As noon approached, Rebecca stood at her window watching the western road for the marshal's party. Instead, her attention was drawn to unusual activity at the edge of her property. Sergeant Adams and several soldiers had gathered, gesturing toward something in the distance. Samuel appeared at her door, his expression a mixture of concern and grudging admiration. "You might want to see this, Miss Rebecca." With the guard's reluctant permission, Rebecca followed Samuel onto the porch. From this vantage point, she could clearly observe what had captured the soldiers' attention. Arrayed in a perfect line along the forest edge stood 30 Comanche warriors on horseback. They made no aggressive moves, simply maintaining their position in silent, disciplined formation. At their center, unmistakable even at this distance, sat Thunder Horse on his paint stallion, a single eagle feather standing vertically in his hair, a symbol of peaceful intent rather than war. "Sweet Jesus," breathed one of the soldiers. "There must be 30 of them. 32, Samuel corrected quietly, and positioned just beyond army jurisdiction. Sergeant Adams approached Rebecca, his expression troubled. "Did you know about this, Mrs. Collins?" "No," she answered truthfully, "though I attempted to prevent it." The sergeant studied the distant line of warriors. "They've made no threatening movements, just appeared about 20 minutes ago and took position." Rebecca understood immediately what was happening. Thunder Horse had received her message. Corporal Davis had apparently fulfilled his part, but the chief had chosen this middle path. Neither attacking nor absent, he was making his presence known while respecting legal boundaries. The message to authorities was clear: this woman has Comanche protection. We are watching. "Should we prepare defensive positions, Sergeant?" asked a nervous young soldier. Adams shook his head. "They're outside our jurisdiction and showing no hostile intent. We maintain readiness, but take no provocative actions." From the eastern road came the sound of approaching riders. Marshal Jenkins and his men arriving exactly as scheduled. The lawman took in the situation with a single sweeping glance, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he assessed both the trading post and the distant line of Comanche observers. "Interesting welcoming committee," he remarked dryly as he dismounted. "Mrs. Collins, I presume?" Rebecca nodded. "Marshal Jenkins." The marshal handed documents to Sergeant Adams, who reviewed them quickly before confirming their authenticity. "Everything appears in order, Marshal. The prisoner is prepared." "For transport?" Jenkins studied Rebecca thoughtfully. I'm authorized to inform you that the governor has reduced the charges from treason to interfering with military operations. Still serious, but not potentially capital. This unexpected modification suggested political considerations were indeed influencing her case, likely due to the newspaper coverage Dr. Foster had mentioned. "Thank you, Marshal," Rebecca replied. "I'm ready to depart." As the soldiers prepared the wagon that would transport her to Denver, Rebecca gazed once more at the line of Comanche warriors. Their silent presence represented something unprecedented. In her experience of frontier relations, a peaceful demonstration of solidarity across the cultural divide that typically separated native and settler with blood and distrust. Thunder Horse remained motionless at the center of his warriors, his posture regal and his attention fixed on the activities around Rebecca. When the marshal's men finally helped her into the transport wagon, the chief raised his hand in the same gesture of acknowledgement he had offered after retrieving his children. Without thinking, Rebecca returned the gesture, a simple, raised hand that bridged the physical distance between them while acknowledging the unusual connection they now shared. She was being taken from her home to face justice in the white man's courts, while he remained with his people beyond settlement. Boundaries. Yet in this moment, they achieved a form of communication that transcended their separate worlds. As the wagon began moving eastward, Rebecca maintained her dignity despite the discomfort of her circumstances. The Comanche warriors remained in their position, watching until the transport disappeared from view around a bend in the road. Rebecca Collins, once simply a widow struggling to maintain a trading post on the Colorado frontier, now traveled toward an uncertain future with a new identity emerging from the ashes of her former life. A woman who had earned the respect of a Comanche chief by placing herself between his children and harm, regardless of the personal cost. The carved eagle rested against her skin beneath her clothing, its presence a tangible reminder that courage recognized courage, even across the boundaries that divided civilizations. Whatever justice awaited in Denver, she carried with her something few settlers could claim: the protection and acknowledgement of those typically considered enemies. And in that knowledge lay a strange form of freedom, regardless of the physical constraints that currently bound her. Denver's territorial courthouse stood as an imposing statement of federal authority, a solid brick structure with tall columns and stone steps designed to intimidate those who approached seeking justice. After 2 weeks in the city jail, Rebecca found the building's grandeur almost refreshing compared to the dank cell where she had awaited her hearing. Marshal Jenkins escorted her personally, having developed a grudging respect for her composure. During their journey from the trading post, unlike Lieutenant Warren, the marshal seemed more interested in proper procedure than personal vendettas. "Judge Hamilton has a reputation for fairness," he remarked as they climbed the courthouse steps. "He'll consider all aspects of your case, not just the military report." Rebecca appreciated this attempt at reassurance, though she harbored few illusions about her situation. Interfering with military operations during active conflicts with native tribes carried severe penalties, even if reduced from the original treason charge. Inside the courthouse, she was surprised to find Dr. Foster waiting. The physician had traveled to Denver immediately after her departure, working tirelessly to arrange proper legal representation and gather character witnesses. "You look well," he greeted her, though his eyes noted the strain evident in her features. "Better accommodations might have been arranged if certain parties hadn't exaggerated security concerns." Rebecca offered a tired smile. "I've endured worse than a Denver jail cell, William." The doctor introduced her to Edward Chambers, a distinguished attorney who had agreed to represent her. "Mr. Chambers specializes in cases involving frontier conflicts," Foster explained. "He's familiar with the complexities of settler-native relations, Chambers, a trim man with intelligent eyes and silver-streaked hair, assessed Rebecca with professional interest. "Dr. Foster has explained the essential facts, Mrs. Collins, but I'd appreciate hearing the details from you directly before we enter the courtroom." Rebecca recounted her story once more, finding the twins near the burning wagon, providing medical care, and ultimately helping them return to their father when it became clear they would otherwise be used as hostages. She omitted certain details, including Thunder Horse's written message and the planned meeting that never occurred due to her arrest. The attorney listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "Your actions were motivated by humanitarian concerns rather than political considerations. We'll emphasize that distinction throughout the proceedings." As they prepared to enter the courtroom, Rebecca noticed Lieutenant Warren and several military officials gathered near the entrance. The lieutenant's cold glare suggested his testimony would be particularly damaging. "Warren seems personally invested in your conviction," Chambers observed quietly. "I disrupted his carefully planned trap," Rebecca replied. "Men like the lieutenant don't forgive such interference, especially from a woman." The courtroom fell silent as Rebecca entered. The wooden benches were filled with a mixture of military personnel, government officials, and curious citizens drawn by newspaper accounts of the woman who defied the army for Indian children. Judge Hamilton, a stern-faced man with piercing blue eyes beneath bushy white eyebrows, surveyed the assembled crowd before calling the hearing to order. The proceedings began with formal charges read by a court official. Rebecca Collins, widow, proprietor of Clearwater Trading Post, stands accused of willfully interfering with military operations, aiding persons engaged in hostilities against the United States, and obstructing lawful detention of enemy combatants. Each charge struck Rebecca as a cold legal translation of what she considered basic human decency. Children requiring medical care had been transformed into enemy combatants in the language of frontier justice. The prosecution presented its case first, with Lieutenant Warren providing detailed testimony about discovering the Comanche children at Rebecca's trading post and her subsequent actions to facilitate their escape. His account emphasized strategic implications rather than humanitarian considerations. Mrs. Collins's interference allowed a known hostile chief to escape potential neutralization, he testified. Thunder Horse returned to his band and remains at large, continuing to threaten settlements throughout the territory. When pressed about the children's condition, Warren reluctantly acknowledged Swift Arrow's injury, but characterized Rebecca's medical assistance as providing aid and comfort to the enemy, a phrase with deliberate echoes of the original treason charge. Chambers challenged Warren's testimony effectively, forcing him to admit that no attacks attributed to Thunder Horse's band had occurred since the incident. The lieutenant's insistence that this merely represented a tactical delay sounded increasingly hollow as the attorney systematically undermined the military's position. When Rebecca finally took the stand, she focused on the children's vulnerability, rather than political considerations. They were injured, frightened, and alone, she testified. Any decent person would have provided the same care. The territorial prosecutor, a sharp-featured man named Sullivan, attempted to characterize her actions as naive at best and treasonous at worst. "Mrs. Collins, were you aware that Thunder Horse had conducted raids on settler homesteads prior to your involvement with his children?" "I was aware of military reports claiming such actions," Rebecca replied carefully. "I was also aware that starvation conditions on the reservations had driven many bands to desperate measures." Sullivan pounced on this response. "So you sympathize with attacks on innocent settlers?" "I sympathize with hungry children," Rebecca countered evenly, "and I recognize that injustice creates circumstances where violence becomes inevitable, though never justified." Her nuanced response appeared to resonate with Judge Hamilton, whose expression suggested appreciation for complexity rather than simplistic frontier narratives. The hearing continued through the afternoon, with character witnesses, including Dr. Foster, testifying to Rebecca's reputation for integrity and service to the community. The most surprising testimony came from Corporal Davis, who had apparently requested permission to appear despite potential career repercussions. Mrs. Collins acted from conscience, not disloyalty, the young soldier stated firmly. She treated those children with the same care she would have shown any injured person, regardless of background. When Sullivan pressed him about Rebecca's actions to facilitate the children's escape, Davis replied, "Sir, using children as bait is not a tactic worthy of the United States Army. Mrs. Collins prevented us from dishonoring the uniform." This statement from an active duty soldier created a noticeable stir in the courtroom. Judge Hamilton called for order before addressing both attorneys. "I've heard sufficient testimony regarding Mrs. Collins's actions and motivations," he announced. "However, there remains a broader context that this court must consider." He turned toward Rebecca. "Mrs. Collins, since your arrest, have you had any contact with Thunder Horse or his band?" The question carried potential dangers regardless of how she answered. Rebecca chose careful honesty. "No direct contact, Your Honor. I received a ceremonial gift acknowledging my assistance to his children, delivered by tribal representatives to my trading post before my transport to Denver." Judge Hamilton raised an eyebrow. "A gift? Of what nature?" "Buffalo robes, medicinal herbs, and a carved eagle," Rebecca replied, omitting the written message. "In Comanche culture, such gifts represent payment of debt and establishment of peaceful relations." The judge considered this information thoughtfully. "Interesting. And since your arrest, has Thunder Horse's band conducted any hostile actions against settlers or military personnel?" "Not to my knowledge, Your Honor." Hamilton nodded, making notes before addressing the attorneys. "I'll render my decision tomorrow morning after reviewing all testimony and relevant precedents. Court is adjourned until 9 o'clock. Rebecca was returned to her cell with mixed emotions. The hearing had proceeded more favorably than she had anticipated, with Judge Hamilton appearing genuinely interested in understanding her motivations rather than simply punishing her actions. Yet the prosecutor had effectively characterized her as a threat to territorial security, a woman whose misguided compassion endangered settler communities. Dr. Foster visited briefly that evening, providing a quiet assessment of the proceedings. "Hamilton has a reputation for pragmatism," he noted. "He'll consider not just the letter of the law, but the practical implications of his ruling." "What practical implications concern him most?" Rebecca asked. "Primarily whether punishing you severely would escalate or reduce tensions with the Comanche," Foster replied. "Your case has become emblematic of larger policy questions about how the territory manages native relations. This perspective, that her personal choices had somehow become entangled with territorial politics, felt surreal to Rebecca. She had acted from immediate compassion, not grand political strategy. "There's something else you should know," Foster added, lowering his voice. "Thunder Horse sent another delegation to the trading post just before I left for Denver. They brought additional gifts and a message for territorial authorities." Rebecca's pulse quickened. "What message?" "That peace with his band depends on your fair treatment," Foster replied gravely. "Not a threat precisely, but certainly a clear statement of interest in your case. This development carried profound implications. Thunder Horse had essentially tied his band's peaceful behavior to Rebecca's fate, a connection that territorial officials couldn't ignore given the costs of renewed conflict. "That could help or harm my case," Rebecca observed. "Hamilton might resent such influence on judicial proceedings." Foster nodded. Or he might recognize an opportunity to pursue peace through unconventional channels. Thunder Horse has never before shown willingness to negotiate with territorial authorities. When Foster departed, Rebecca sat on her narrow cot, contemplating this unexpected development. The chief had extended his protection beyond ceremonial gifts to direct diplomatic intervention, a remarkable shift for a leader known primarily for military resistance rather than negotiation. Morning arrived with disruptive news. As Rebecca prepared for her return to court, Marshal Jenkins appeared at her cell with an uncharacteristically grave expression. "There's been a development overnight," he informed her. "Lieutenant Warren's patrol was ambushed while returning to Fort Carson. 3 soldiers dead, Warren himself wounded but alive." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "Comanche?" Jenkins nodded grimly. "According to initial reports, though not necessarily Thunder Horse's band. The timing couldn't have been worse. Any attack on soldiers would inevitably color the judge's perception of native relations, potentially undermining the careful distinctions her defense had established." "There's more," Jenkins continued reluctantly. "Warren is claiming the attackers specifically mentioned your name during the ambush." "That's impossible," Rebecca protested. "Thunder Horse would never—" She stopped, realizing she had no way to predict the chief's actions with certainty, despite their unusual connection. Jenkins studied her reaction carefully. "You seem quite confident about a man known for brutal tactics, Mrs. Collins." "I'm confident that linking me to an attack makes no logical sense," she clarified. "Thunder Horse is many things, but foolish isn't among them. Associating me with violence would guarantee harsh sentencing." The marshal appeared unconvinced, but escorted her to the courthouse without further comment. The atmosphere had changed dramatically overnight. Military personnel dominated the gallery, their expressions uniformly hostile. Judge Hamilton's face revealed nothing as he called the session to order. "Before rendering my decision, I must address new information received. This morning," he announced, "Lieutenant Warren's patrol suffered casualties last night in what appears to be a Comanche attack. The prosecution has requested consideration of this development in relation to the current case." Prosecutor Sullivan rose immediately. "Your Honor, this attack demonstrates the direct consequences of Mrs. Collins's interference with military operations. By preventing proper detention of Thunder Horse's children, she enabled continued hostile activities by his band." Chambers objected forcefully. "Your Honor, there is no evidence connecting this attack to Thunder Horse specifically, nor any logical connection to my client's actions." Sullivan pressed his advantage. "Lieutenant Warren reports that attackers specifically referenced Mrs. Collins during the ambush, suggesting a direct connection. This claim sent murmurs through the courtroom. Rebecca felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet, all progress toward understanding evaporating in the face of renewed violence. Judge Hamilton called for order. "Mr. Chambers, does your client wish to respond to this new information?" Rebecca stood before Chambers could answer. "Your Honor, I categorically reject any suggestion that I bear responsibility for this attack, or that Thunder Horse would associate my name with violence against soldiers. Such an action would contradict everything I've observed about his character and tactical approach." The judge studied her with penetrating intensity. "You speak with remarkable confidence about a Comanche war chief, Mrs. Collins." "I speak based on direct observation and rational assessment," Rebecca replied steadily. "Thunder Horse demonstrated honor and restraint when retrieving his children. He has sent formal peace gestures through appropriate channels. Attacking soldiers while invoking my name would undermine both objectives." Hamilton considered this logic, then made an unexpected decision. "This court will recess for 3 hours. While I receive complete reports regarding the attack, we will reconvene at 2 o'clock. The recess provided opportunity for frantic consultation between Rebecca and her attorney. Chambers had received preliminary reports that contradicted Warren's account in significant details. The attack occurred nearly 30 miles from the lieutenant's expected route, he explained quietly, suggesting either poor navigation or deliberate deviation from assigned patrol areas. Warren was hunting for Thunderhorse, Rebecca surmised, using the patrol as bait. Possibly, Chambers acknowledged. More troubling is the inconsistency regarding your name being mentioned. Only Warren claims to have heard this. None of the surviving soldiers corroborate that detail. This information reinforced Rebecca's suspicion that Warren was manipulating events to ensure her conviction. The lieutenant's personal vendetta had apparently escalated to dangerous new levels. When court reconvened, Judge Hamilton's expression had hardened noticeably. He reviewed additional documents before addressing the crowded room. I have received comprehensive reports regarding last night's attack, including statements from surviving soldiers and medical assessments of the wounded, he announced. These materials present significant discrepancies with Lieutenant Warren's initial claims. Sullivan appeared startled by this development. Your Honor, Lieutenant Warren provided a formal statement under oath. Yes, he did, Hamilton agreed grimly. And that statement conflicts with those of every other survivor. No soldier reports hearing Mrs. Collins's name mentioned during the attack. Furthermore, the patrol was significantly outside its assigned territory when ambushed, without apparent justification. The judge fixed his gaze on the prosecutor. This court will not be manipulated through conveniently timed incidents or manufactured evidence, Mr. Sullivan. I am striking all testimony regarding last night's attack from consideration in this case. This ruling represented a devastating blow to the prosecution's last-minute strategy. Sullivan attempted to protest, but was silenced by Hamilton's raised hand. I am prepared to render my decision regarding Mrs. Collins, the judge declared. Having considered all testimony and relevant precedents, I find the defendant guilty of interfering with military operations. He paused as Rebecca absorbed this expected but still painful verdict. However, I find significant mitigating circumstances that justify clemency in sentencing. The courtroom remained absolutely silent as Hamilton continued. Rebecca Collins acted from humanitarian motives consistent with civilized values that this territory claims to uphold. Her intervention regarding the Comanche children represents the complex moral challenges faced by those who live on the frontier, where official policy and human compassion sometimes conflict. The judge leaned forward, his next words carrying particular weight. Furthermore, Mrs. Collins's actions appear to have established an unexpected channel of communication with a previously hostile band. Evidence suggests Thunderhorse has maintained peace since his children's return, a development that serves territorial interests more effectively than continued conflict. Hamilton's sentencing decision stunned the gallery. The defendant is sentenced to time already served, followed by 6 months restricted movement confined to Clearwater Trading Post and its immediate surroundings. During this period, she will provide regular reports to territorial authorities regarding any native interactions at her trading post. Rebecca could scarcely believe what she was hearing. The judge continued, directly addressing her. Mrs. Collins, this court recognizes that your trading post has inadvertently become a point of peaceful contact between cultures. Your sentence reflects the territory's interest in maintaining that channel while ensuring appropriate oversight. The implication was clear. Rebecca was being positioned as an unofficial intermediary with Thunderhorse's band, with her trading post serving as neutral ground for potential diplomatic exchanges. What had begun as a simple act of compassion toward injured children had evolved into something with far-reaching implications for territorial relations. As the courtroom erupted in mixed reactions, Rebecca caught Dr. Foster's eye across the room. His slight smile confirmed what she already suspected. He had helped shape this outcome through his contacts with territorial officials, leveraging Thunder Horse's interest in her case toward a potential peace initiative. Marshal Jenkins appeared at her side as the judge departed. "Looks like I'll be escorting you home rather than to prison, Mrs. Collins." "Home," Rebecca repeated, the word carrying new significance after weeks of uncertainty. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow," Jenkins replied. "I'm assigned to establish the protocols for your restricted movement and reporting requirements." He hesitated before adding, "For what it's worth, I believe Hamilton made the right decision. The territory needs fewer corpses and more conversations." That evening, as Rebecca prepared for her journey back to the trading post, Dr. Foster visited her cell one final time. "You've become something unprecedented on the frontier," he observed. "A bridge between worlds typically separated by violence and mistrust." Rebecca considered this characterization with mixed emotions. "I never sought such a role." "The most effective bridges rarely volunteer for the position," Foster replied with gentle humor. "They simply find themselves spanning dangerous waters because they happen to be in precisely the right place." As they discussed practical arrangements for her return, Rebecca's thoughts turned to Thunder Horse and his children. Had they recovered fully from their ordeal? Did they understand the consequences her intervention had created? Would the chief honor the connection established through their unusual circumstances? The carved eagle remained her most tangible link to these questions, the small token she had managed to keep throughout her confinement by concealing it within her clothing. Running her fingers over its meticulously detailed features, Rebecca recognized that her future had become intertwined with forces beyond her previous experience. She had saved 2 children from a burning wagon, never imagining that this simple act of human decency would transform her into something unique on the frontier landscape. A settler woman with the protection of a Comanche chief, positioned by circumstance and judicial decree as a potential instrument of peace in a territory, accustomed to conflict. Tomorrow would bring her journey full circle, back to Clearwater Trading Post where everything had begun. What awaited her there, reconciliation or continued challenges, peace initiatives or renewed tensions, remained uncertain. But Rebecca Collins had discovered resources within herself that would meet whatever came with the same courage that had driven her toward that burning wagon on a scorching summer afternoon that now seemed a lifetime ago. The carved eagle represented that courage, recognized and honored across the cultural divide that separated its maker from its recipient. In the world of rigid boundaries and deadly misunderstandings, such recognition offered rare hope for something beyond the endless cycle of vengeance that had claimed too many lives on both sides of the frontier. Clearwater Trading Post looked remarkably unchanged as Rebecca approached it after nearly a month's absence. The summer had progressed during her confinement, turning the surrounding prairie to golden hues that rippled in the constant Colorado breeze. Marshal Jenkins rode beside her, having maintained respectful distance throughout their journey from Denver. "Home sweet home," he remarked as the familiar buildings came into view, "though with some modifications, I'm afraid." Rebecca noticed the additions immediately. A small cabin had been constructed approximately 50 yards from the main trading post, positioned to provide clear sight lines to all approaches. 2 territorial deputies stood on its porch, observing their arrival with professional interest. "Your supervision detail," Jenkins explained. "Judge Hamilton's orders require monitoring of all native contacts at the trading post. Deputies Miller and Thompson will maintain rotating shifts with 2 others." Though she had anticipated such arrangements, the physical manifestation of her restricted status struck Rebecca forcefully. Her trading post was simultaneously her home and a form of confinement, her business now entangled with territorial policy in ways she had never imagined. "Will they interfere with legitimate trading?" she asked, concerned about the practical implications for her livelihood. Jenkins shook his head. "Their orders specify observation only unless clear security threats emerge. Regular commerce should continue normally." As they approached, Samuel emerged from the stable, his weathered face breaking into a rare, full smile at Rebecca's return. Dr. Foster waited on the trading post porch, having traveled ahead to prepare for her arrival. "Quite the welcoming committee," Rebecca observed, touched by their presence. Jenkins dismounted first, assisting Rebecca from her horse with unexpected courtesy. "These gentlemen were quite persistent about being here when you returned. Apparently, you inspire considerable loyalty, Mrs. Collins." Samuel reached her first, his calloused hand grasping hers with surprising gentleness. "Trading post wasn't the same without you, Miss Rebecca. Customers have been asking daily when you'd return." Dr. Foster approached more formally, but with evident relief. "Welcome home. Your business has been maintained in your absence, though. Certain customers have been reluctant to trade with temporary management." Rebecca understood his diplomatic phrasing. The Comanche and other native traders had likely avoided the post while she was gone, unwilling to risk military entanglements without her mediating presence. Marshal Jenkins conducted a brief meeting with the deputies, explaining protocols and reporting requirements before returning to Rebecca with formal documentation of her restricted status. "These papers outline the precise boundaries of your permitted movement, essentially your property line plus 500 yards in all directions," he explained. "Monthly reports regarding any native contacts are required, with immediate notification of any communication from Thunderhorse specifically." Rebecca accepted the documents with outward composure, though inwardly she bristled at the bureaucratic translation of her life into regulated parameters. "Is there anything else I should know, Marshal?" Jenkins hesitated before adding unofficially, "Judge Hamilton's arrangement has critics in military circles. Lieutenant Warren survived his injuries and has been particularly vocal about the dangerous precedent of your sentencing." "I imagine he would be," Rebecca replied dryly. "Just be cautious," Jenkins advised. "Document everything meticulously. Your reports will receive scrutiny from multiple departments." After the marshal's departure, Rebecca finally entered her trading post, experiencing the bittersweet homecoming of a returnee who finds everything simultaneously familiar and strange. The main room remained organized exactly as she had left it, though evidence of Samuel's temporary management appeared in small details. Different arrangements of stock, modified record-keeping in the ledger. "Everything's in good order," Samuel assured her, correctly interpreting her assessment. "Even kept that map updated like Daniel always did." Rebecca moved to the counter where her late husband's territorial map hung. Samuel had indeed maintained Daniel's tradition, marking recent developments with careful notation, including the location of the burned wagon where she had found the twins. "Any word from our Comanche customers?" she asked carefully, mindful of the deputies who might be monitoring her conversations. Samuel shook his head, not directly, though hunters reported seeing smoke signals in the northern hills last week, patterns suggesting Thunderhorse's band might be camping near Blackwater Canyon. The location held significance, close enough for convenient access to the trading post while remaining beyond military patrol routes. Rebecca filed this information away without comment. Dr. Foster had brought supplies from Denver, including letters from the Attorney Chambers regarding legal restrictions and interpretations of her sentencing terms. "You're walking a delicate line," he observed after the basic arrangements were discussed. "The territory simultaneously restricts your movement while expecting you to maintain unique connections with the Comanche." "A paradox worthy of Emerson," Rebecca replied, with a hint of her old humor, "confined to facilitate communication." That evening, After Foster departed for his return to Copper Springs, Rebecca sat on her porch, watching twilight settle across the prairie. The deputies maintained a discreet distance from her personal quarters while ensuring clear observation of approach routes. Their presence represented her new reality, neither fully free nor truly imprisoned, occupying an undefined space on the frontier's legal and cultural boundaries. Samuel brought coffee, settling into the chair beside her. "Things have happened while you were gone," he said quietly. "Things those deputies don't know about." Rebecca maintained her casual posture despite heightened interest. "What sort of things?" "Trading's been happening," the old soldier replied, cryptically. "Just not during daylight or through front doors?" She understood immediately. "Thunderhorse's people have been coming at night?" Samuel nodded. "Not the chief himself, but his representatives. They've been leaving items behind the stable, mostly furs and handcrafted goods, taking supplies in exchange: coffee, flour, ammunition. This unsanctioned commerce potentially violated Rebecca's restrictions, though the boundaries were ambiguous. Her sentencing required reporting native contacts, but didn't explicitly prohibit legitimate trade. "Have they left any messages?" she asked, careful to keep her voice casual. "Nothing written," Samuel replied, "but the last group brought something specific." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object wrapped in soft leather. "Said it belonged with its companion." Rebecca unwrapped the bundle to find another carved figure, a female eagle matching the male Thunderhorse had previously sent. The craftsmanship was identical, suggesting the chief had created this companion piece specifically for her. "Arrived 3 days ago," Samuel added, "along with fresh medicinal herbs and a deerskin dress, size for a woman about your height." The implications weren't subtle. Thunderhorse was maintaining their connection despite her absence, providing resources suggesting not just gratitude, but ongoing relationship. The matching eagle carried particular significance in Comanche culture, where paired symbols represented partnership rather than mere association. "I should report this," Rebecca said thoughtfully, running her finger over the intricate carving. "Judge Hamilton's arrangement requires disclosure of communications." Samuel's expression turned pragmatic. "Could report some things while organizing others. Deputies can't watch every angle of this property all hours." The suggestion of selective reporting presented immediate ethical questions, yet Rebecca recognized the practical wisdom in Samuel's approach. Complete transparency might prematurely close channels of communication that could eventually serve broader peace efforts. "I'll need to establish clear boundaries," she decided. Legitimate trade reported. Openly personal messages handled more carefully. Samuel nodded approvingly. "Been thinking similar thoughts myself." The following weeks established new patterns at Clearwater Trading Post. Rebecca resumed regular business operations, welcoming settler customers during daylight hours while documenting everything meticulously for the deputies' reports. Dr. Foster visited weekly, ostensibly to monitor her health after confinement, but primarily to maintain their strategic alliance. After 3 weeks, the first Comanche traders appeared openly, 3 young men bringing buffalo hides and beadwork to exchange for mundane supplies. They conducted business professionally, speaking minimal English and avoiding provocative behavior. The deputies observed without interference, recording the interaction as required, but finding nothing objectionable. Rebecca recognized none of these traders from Thunderhorse's immediate circle, suggesting the chief was testing boundaries carefully. Through lower-risk representatives, she maintained appropriate distance while ensuring fair exchange, establishing precedent for legitimate commerce within her restricted parameters. That night, after the deputies had retired to their cabin, Samuel signaled Rebecca with their prearranged code, 3 soft taps on the storeroom wall. She found him behind the stable, where a Comanche woman waited in the shadows. Rebecca recognized her immediately, despite the months that had passed. "Rising star," she breathed, astonished to find Thunder Horse's daughter standing before her. The girl had grown taller, her childish features maturing toward adolescence. She wore a deerskin dress, adorned with intricate beadwork, her bearing reflecting the dignity of her position as a chief's daughter. "Medicine woman," Rising Star greeted her in much improved English. "Father sends words with me." Samuel discreetly withdrew to maintain watch for deputies, leaving Rebecca alone with the unexpected messenger. "Your brother?" Rebecca asked immediately. "How is Swift Arrow?" Rising Star's expression warmed. "Brother is strong again, arm healed well." She touched her own shoulder in demonstration. "He wanted to come. Father said no. Too dangerous." Rebecca nodded, understanding. Despite Judge Hamilton's unusual sentencing arrangement, the military would consider Swift Arrow a prize captive if discovered near the trading post. "Father says thank you for the eagle gift," Rising Star continued, apparently referring to Rebecca's careful acknowledgement of the paired carving in her official reports. "Says medicine woman understands talking without words." This confirmation of Thunder Horse's attention to her reports carried significant implications. The chief was monitoring official communications while maintaining unofficial contact, a sophisticated approach to frontier diplomacy that belied stereotypes of native leaders. Rising Star delivered her primary message with remarkable clarity. Father asks if medicine woman would talk with him. Not soldiers, not territory men, just talk about peace for his people. The invitation represented precisely what territorial authorities hoped might emerge from Rebecca's unique position. Yet, conducting such a meeting without official oversight would technically violate her restrictions. "When and where would your father suggest this talk?" Rebecca asked carefully. "Next moon, when face is half," Rising Star replied, clearly reciting precise instructions. "Lightning tree at night. Father comes alone if medicine woman comes alone." The proposed meeting would require Rebecca to violate her movement restrictions by traveling beyond her permitted boundaries. Detection would likely result in imprisonment and termination of the delicate connection established with Thunder Horse's band. Yet refusing would squander a rare opportunity for direct communication with a leader who had consistently rejected official overtures. Thunder Horse was offering unprecedented access precisely because Rebecca existed outside formal authority structures, a woman who had earned his trust through demonstrated compassion rather than political calculation. "Tell your father I will. Consider his invitation carefully," Rebecca replied, refusing to commit immediately, despite her instinctive inclination to accept. "There are complications in my situation he may not fully understand." Rising Star nodded solemnly. "Father knows about the territory men are watching, knows medicine woman has boundaries she cannot cross without danger." She reached into a small pouch at her waist, withdrawing a folded piece of paper. "Father says, give this, help decide." Rebecca accepted the paper, recognizing Thunder Horse's now familiar handwriting when she carefully unfolded it. The message was brief but extraordinary. "I offer formal peace between my band and settlers if medicine woman will speak for us. Territory chiefs do not hear Comanche words. Perhaps they will hear yours. My children live because you crossed boundaries. Others feared. Some boundaries must be crossed for greater good." ETH, the chief was essentially proposing Rebecca as an intermediary in peace negotiations, a role unprecedented for a frontier woman, yet suited to her unique position, bridging cultural divides. More remarkably, he was suggesting willingness to end hostilities that had persisted for years, conditioned primarily on having a trustworthy channel of communication. "Your father's offer is very important," Rebecca told Rising Star seriously. "Please tell him I will find a way to meet, though it may not be exactly when and where he suggests." After the girl departed as silently as she had arrived, Rebecca discussed the development with Samuel, sharing Thunder Horse's written proposal. "Could change everything," the old soldier observed thoughtfully. or could be the thing that sends you to prison if handled wrong. Rebecca recognized the delicate balance required. I need to establish official permission for expanded movement, she decided. Create legitimate channels that serve everyone's interests while protecting myself legally. The following day, she composed careful letters to Judge Hamilton and the territorial governor, outlining potential for meaningful peace. Negotiations without explicitly revealing Rising Star's nocturnal visit. She emphasized economic benefits of regularized trade with Thunder Horse's band, potential reduction in military expenditures, and unique opportunity represented by the chief's apparent willingness to communicate through her established connection. Dr. Foster delivered these communications personally to Denver, adding his professional endorsement to Rebecca's proposal. His medical position and respected standing provided crucial legitimacy to what might otherwise have been dismissed as a confined woman's desperate attempt at expanded freedom. 2 weeks passed without response, the half-moon approaching with no official sanction for Rebecca's proposed diplomatic role. As the designated meeting night drew closer, she faced the most significant decision since finding those children near the burning wagon. Risk imprisonment by violating restrictions, or sacrificing perhaps the only opportunity for meaningful peace dialogue with Thunder Horse. The decision crystallized the evening before the proposed meeting when Marshal Jenkins arrived unexpectedly at the trading post. His expression betrayed nothing as he requested private conversation with Rebecca, leading her to wonder if her communications with Rising Star had somehow been discovered. I bring an unofficial response to your proposal, Jenkins announced, once they were alone in her living quarters. Judge Hamilton and the governor have discussed your letters extensively. Rebecca waited, maintaining outward composure despite inner tension. Officially, your restrictions cannot be modified without formal hearings and documentation, Jenkins continued. Such processes would require weeks at minimum and involve military consultation that would likely generate objections. Rebecca's hope began to fade until the marshal added significantly, unofficially, territorial authorities recognize unique opportunity in Thunder Horse's apparent willingness to communicate through you specifically. He removed an unmarked envelope from his coat. This document represents temporary expansion of your permitted boundaries for purposes of gathering information about native movements and intentions. It bears no official seals or signatures, but would provide reasonable defense against charges. Should certain activities be discovered, the implications were clear: tacit permission for limited communication with Thunder Horse while maintaining official deniability for territorial authorities. Rebecca accepted the envelope, understanding the complex political calculation it represented. Deputy Thompson has been reassigned effective immediately, Jenkins added casually. His replacement won't arrive until the day after tomorrow. Deputy Miller is known to retire early and sleep soundly. This choreographed reduction in supervision confirmed the territory's unspoken sanction of her planned meeting. Rebecca studied the marshal thoughtfully. Why are you personally involved in this arrangement, Marshal Jenkins? He considered her question before responding with unexpected candor. I've buried too many good men over territorial disputes that could have been resolved through conversation. If Thunder Horse genuinely seeks dialogue rather than continuation of bloodshed, only a fool would reject the opportunity. After Jenkins departed, Rebecca prepared carefully for the momentous meeting ahead. She selected clothing that balanced dignity with practicality, her best skirt and blouse beneath a warm shawl against the autumn night chill. The paired eagle carvings she placed in a pouch at her waist, their symbolism appropriate for this unprecedented dialogue. Samuel provided final reconnaissance reports as evening approached. Deputy Miller started his second whiskey at sundown, he noted with satisfaction. Man snoring loud enough to wake his own corpse by now. The night air carried autumn's first, crispness as Rebecca saddled her mare after midnight. Samuel would maintain watch at the trading post, prepared to create distractions if the deputy somehow roused himself during her absence. "Be careful," the old soldier advised as she prepared to depart. Thunderhorse might be sincere about peace talks, but he's still a warrior with his own priorities. Rebecca patted the document Jenkins had provided, secured within her dress pocket. "I'm under no illusions about diplomatic complexities, Samuel. But someone has to attempt connection, or we're doomed to endless cycles of violence." The lightning tree stood approximately 1 mile beyond Rebecca's permitted boundaries, a calculated distance that demonstrated commitment while allowing plausible return before dawn. She rode without lantern, guided by a half-moon that silvered the prairie grasses and created distinct shadows perfect for navigation. As the massive split tree appeared against the night sky, Rebecca detected no immediate signs of Thunderhorse's presence. She dismounted cautiously, securing her mare to a low branch before moving toward the ancient cottonwood's base. "You came alone, as requested." The voice emerged from shadows before the speaker materialized. Thunderhorse stepping into moonlight with the same fluid grace she remembered from their brief encounter months earlier. He wore minimal ceremonial adornment, a single eagle feather in his hair and the chief's medallion at his throat, suggesting emphasis on substance over display. "As did you," Rebecca observed, noting no evidence of protective warriors in the surrounding darkness. Thunderhorse inclined his head slightly, acknowledging their mutual vulnerability. "Trust begins with risk," he stated simply. His English remained precise and educated, confirming stories of his mission school education. Rebecca studied him openly, recognizing similar assessment in his steady gaze. In person, without the desperate circumstances of their previous encounter, she could appreciate the intelligence evident in his features and the composed dignity of his bearing. "Your children have recovered fully?" she asked, establishing personal connection before addressing larger matters. Something softened briefly in Thunderhorse's expression. "They are well. Swift Arrow's arm healed without weakness. Rising Star speaks of you often." He paused before adding, "They insisted I bring something." From a small pouch, he withdrew a carefully wrapped object, offering it with formal courtesy. Rebecca unwrapped the covering to find an exquisitely beaded band designed to be worn at the wrist. "Their work," Thunderhorse explained. "Rising Star designed the pattern. Swift Arrow selected the colors. They wished to create something showing two paths joining." The intricate beadwork indeed depicted two distinct paths merging into a shared route, symbolic significance requiring no translation across cultural boundaries. "Please thank them for me," Rebecca said, genuinely touched by the children's thoughtfulness. "I think of them often." With personal connections acknowledged, their conversation shifted to the substantial matters that had necessitated this clandestine meeting. Thunderhorse outlined specific concerns that prevented peaceful relations with territorial authorities. Broken promises regarding hunting territories, inadequate reservation supplies, and military incursions into lands guaranteed by previous treaties. Rebecca listened carefully, neither defending nor condemning territorial policies, but seeking genuine understanding of Comanche perspectives. When appropriate, she explained constraints affecting settler communities and governmental responses, providing context without justification for broken agreements. "Your people say many words on paper," Thunderhorse observed after one such exchange. "Then different words when paper becomes inconvenient." Rebecca couldn't dispute this assessment of frontier treaty history. "There are those who believe agreements should be honored regardless of convenience," she offered instead. "Not all settlers support broken promises." Their dialogue continued through deepening night, exploring possibilities for renegotiated boundaries. that might satisfy essential Comanche needs while addressing settler security concerns. Thunderhorse demonstrated sophisticated understanding of territorial politics, identifying specific officials receptive to compromise and others inherently opposed to native accommodation. As false dawn approached, signaling a necessary conclusion to their historic meeting, Rebecca addressed the fundamental question underlying their exchange. "Why me?" she asked directly. "Why establish this connection through someone with no official authority?" Thunderhorse considered his response carefully. "Officials speak with forked tongues because they serve many masters. You acted from a clear heart when you saved my children, regardless of the consequences." His steady gaze held hers. "Honest words can only come from honest hearts, medicine woman." The simple truth of this assessment resonated deeply. Rebecca had never sought political influence or diplomatic responsibility, yet her straightforward compassion had created possibilities where official channels had consistently failed. "I will convey your concerns to those with authority to address them," she promised, "though I cannot guarantee their response." Thunderhorse nodded, understanding. "And I will maintain peace while they consider. No raids, no attacks, if territorial. Soldiers respect boundaries we have discussed." As they prepared to part ways, Rebecca removed the paired eagle carvings from her pouch. "These represent something important in your culture," she observed, holding the matched figures. "I wish to understand their significance correctly." The chief studied the carvings he had created. "Eagles mate for life," he explained. "They build nests between worlds, earth and sky, as you build connection between our peoples." He met her gaze directly. "They also defend their territories fiercely when threatened, yet prefer to soar above conflicts when possible." The layered symbolism confirmed Rebecca's suspicions about Thunderhorse's intended meaning. These weren't merely gratitude tokens, but representation of potential partnership across traditional boundaries. "I will honor what they represent," she said carefully, returning the carvings to her pouch. Thunderhorse mounted his paint stallion with characteristic grace. "When the moon shows full face, I will send the rising star to a trading post openly as a recognized messenger between our peoples. She will carry a wampum belt showing peace intention for all to witness." This public demonstration would transform their private dialogue into an acknowledged diplomatic channel, precisely what territorial authorities had hoped might develop through Rebecca's unique position. "I will ensure she receives an appropriate welcome," Rebecca promised, "and that her message reaches those with power to respond meaningfully." With dawn approaching, they parted ways, Thunderhorse vanishing silently toward northern hills, while Rebecca returned to Clearwater Trading Post through lightning darkness. Samuel awaited her at the property boundary, confirming Deputy Miller remained blissfully unaware of her absence. The following days established new patterns reflecting their historic meetings' outcomes. Rebecca submitted careful reports documenting potential for peace negotiations without revealing specifics of her clandestine encounter. Marshal Jenkins responded with expanded authorization for information-gathering activities that essentially legitimized further communications with Thunderhorse's representatives. When Rising Star arrived as promised during the full moon, deputies observed without interference as Rebecca formally received the girl and the symbolic wampum belt she carried. Dr. Foster documented the exchange for territorial authorities, adding his professional assessment regarding opportunities for sustained peace initiatives. Through autumn and into winter, Clearwater Trading Post gradually transformed from isolated frontier business into recognized neutral ground where cultures in conflict found space for tentative connection. Comanche traders appeared with increasing frequency, conducting legitimate commerce under Rebecca's supervision. Military patrols maintained respectful distance from Thunder Horse's hunting territories as outlined in Rebecca's diplomatic communications. Lieutenant Warren eventually received reassignment to a distant post, his persistent objections to negotiating with hostiles, carrying diminishing weight as economic and security benefits of reduced conflict became increasingly apparent. Deputies maintained nominal surveillance of Rebecca's activities, though with decreasing attention to minor technical violations of her movement restrictions. On a clear December afternoon, as Rebecca updated Daniel's territorial map with newly negotiated boundaries, Samuel announced visitors approaching from the north. Through the trading post window, she observed a small Comanche delegation, including Thunder Horse himself, the chief's first public appearance at Clearwater since retrieving his children months earlier. Deputy Miller appeared at Rebecca's side, formally documenting the chief's arrival. "Should I send for additional personnel, ma'am?" he asked, with the excessive deference that had gradually replaced initial suspicion. "That won't be necessary, Deputy," Rebecca replied calmly. "Chief Thunder Horse comes under flag of truce for scheduled negotiations. Marshal Jenkins was notified last week as she moved to the porch to formally welcome this historic visit. Rebecca Collins, once simply a widow struggling to maintain a remote trading post, reflected on the extraordinary journey initiated by one simple act of compassion toward children in desperate need. The carved eagles remained on the shelf above her desk, their matched forms representing the unexpected connection formed across seemingly insurmountable cultural divides. She wore Rising Star's beaded wristband as she greeted Thunder Horse, with the dignity of a recognized intermediary between worlds typically separated by misunderstanding and violence. No one could predict whether these fragile negotiations would ultimately establish lasting peace across the troubled frontier. But as winter sunlight illuminated the faces of those gathered from disparate worlds at this remote trading post, Rebecca recognized that something unprecedented had already been achieved. Genuine communication, replacing reflexive hostility, and tentative trust emerging where only fear had previously existed. The woman who had saved twins from a burning wagon had herself been transformed by that courageous act, becoming a bridge between civilizations where previously only weapons had spoken. And in that transformation lay hope for others who might recognize that compassion ultimately offered stronger protection than conflict, and understanding proved more valuable than vengeance in the complex tapestry of frontier existence. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.